Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
I turned 18 in 2008, and on the day of my birthday, for reasons I won't bore you with, I packed up my things and moved out. For 4 years, I lived in my car, working as a barista from 6 to 2 and as a line cook from 4 to 10. My plan was to work until I had enough money for my own place, and then to either go to college or get a more stable job. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I did it, but by 22, I'd saved up a decent sum of money and began my hunt for a semi-permanent place of residence. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and though housing prices weren't as bad as they are now, it was still a pricey county. After months of asking around, I was connected with Anders, an elderly man who was leasing a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in North Hollywood for far below market rate. The catch, because there's always a catch when it comes to affordable housing, was that the house had been terribly maintained. It had been unoccupied for a year and would need some serious TLC before most people could comfortably reside in it. I, however, had been living out of a car for 4 years. As long as the place had running water, it would be an upgrade for me. I moved into the house in fall 2012. Anders gave me a tour before I got settled. He was a short, joyful old man, well-meaning, but how do I put this? Maybe not the most focused as a result of his age. At one point during the tour, he showed me the bathroom, then the master bedroom, then the bathroom again, then the master bedroom again. He was about to walk into the bathroom for a third time before I gently guided him down the hall. The house itself was livable but weathered. Dim lighting from outdated fixtures cast long shadows over peeling wallpaper. The ceiling in many of the rooms was discolored from past leaks. The faucet in the kitchen sink was broken, the bathtub was badly chipped, and a few of the cabinet handles fell off in my hand. It was a rundown place, located in a bars on the window kind of neighborhood, but still it was my place. I was smiling ear to ear when Anders gave me the keys. "It's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now," he instructed, which I found ironic. Before he left, he paused in the front doorway, drawing a hand to his chin as he looked behind me into the house. I tried to follow his gaze, but couldn't figure out what he was looking at. "Everything alright?" "Yes. Just that something looks different about that bathroom, though I can't put my finger on what." Well, it's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now." And with that, he gave me a nod and left me to my unpacking. I hadn't realized how much I'd miss living in a house. I didn't care how rundown the place was. Just having an accessible bathroom and a full-size mattress to sleep on made me feel like a king. After I'd spent a few days cleaning the place up, I invited my sister and her fiance over for dinner. I'm sure it sounds stupid, but my newly acquired ability to host company made me proud. In no time at all, I'd comfortably settled into my new home. That evening, after saying goodbye to my guests, I took a shower. The bathroom lacked a traditional above-the-sink mirror. Instead, it had a wide, full-length mirror mounted on the wall to the left of the vanity. When I exited the shower and stepped up to the glass, raising a hand to wipe away the fog, I noticed something odd. In the condensation, right at my eye level, was the word "hi." I didn't know what to make of it. Somehow, the letters seemed intentional. It was hard to pass off as simply the way the steam had settled. My sister had been in the bathroom just before she left. Maybe she had written the word on the mirror with her fingertip, and the steam had only made the letters visible after my shower. I almost texted her about it, but the message seemed ridiculous when I typed it out, paranoid even. I wiped the mirror down and turned in for the night, and soon I forgot about it entirely. The following week, I received a promotion at one of my jobs, and while I was grateful for the additional income, my new position meant longer days. Additionally, I realized that a few of the house repairs were beyond my ability, and so I started outsourcing some work to contractors. It was annoying to only have the house to myself at night, but I didn't have another option with my busy schedule. Things were generally progressing smoothly, though every once in a while, in the middle of the night, I would be awoken by a sound that I couldn't quite place. When I next noticed writing on my mirror, I had been living at the house for a month. The second sighting occurred in much the same way as the first. I came back home after work and took a shower. When I pushed back the shower curtain, I looked at the glass and saw, written in the condensation, the words, "Staying long." Now, I could pass 2 letters off as a coincidence, but 2 words, an entire question. That was no coincidence. Someone had been in my bathroom, and recently. family. I had contractors in and out of my house all the time, so one of them could have written the message, but why? I got dressed and put a hand on the bathroom doorknob, about to go back into my bedroom, when it occurred to me that whoever had written the message might still be around. I slowly cracked open the door, peering down the dark hallway in one direction, then the other. I listened very carefully, but heard nothing. I walked around my house, which didn't take long given its size, and looked for anything out of place. All of my doors were locked, all of my windows were shut, and none of my personal items had been disturbed. If someone had broken into my house, they were long gone by the time I looked around. That second message put me on edge for days. I triple checked that my windows and doors were locked each night. I looked in every potential hiding spot, of which there were few in my little house, after I came home from work and before I went to sleep. And yet, though I was certain that my house was secure, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. A month passed without incident. I had almost started to feel at home in my new lodgings again until one Friday morning I awoke just past 3 a.m. I couldn't immediately tell what had woken me. Often the house settled at night, creaking and groaning in ways that made it sound alive, but in that moment the house was silent. It was only after I turned my head to the side did I realize that my bedroom door, which I was certain I had shut, was wide open. I stared down the hallway, feeling as though I were gazing into a black hole. The darkness was abyssal. I kept waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for them to pick out the familiar shapes of my home, but they never did. I couldn't see a thing, so why did I feel like something could see me? Like there was something in the house with me, just feet beyond the threshold to my bedroom, watching, waiting. Somehow, I found the courage to rise from my bed and walk toward the door. When I made it to the handle, I grabbed it and slammed the door shut. I didn't investigate further, didn't so much as stick my head out into the hall for a closer look. My bedroom door didn't have a lock, none of the doors except the bathroom did, so I dragged my bookcase in front of the door. It was a small bookcase, and an intruder could probably ram the door open anyway if they wanted to, but not before the sound alerted me. When morning came and I had to leave the house for work, I genuinely considered exiting my house through the window. I was almost late by the time I worked up the nerve myself to look around my house before I left. As always, I found nothing amiss. After work, when I reluctantly returned home for the night, I ate a quick dinner and hopped in the shower. I remember standing in the tub for a long time, mulling over my predicament. I'd heard horror stories about people secretly living in other people's homes. Maybe I'd become a victim of a frog without even knowing, but if that was the case, then where the hell were they? There was nowhere to hide in that tiny house. I'd torn the place apart multiple times by then, checking every cabinet and closet. The inside of the house couldn't be accessed from the crawl space, and the air vents were too small for a person to fit in. Suddenly, I heard a click, so tiny that I'd almost missed it entirely. I tore back the shower curtain, gripping the shampoo bottle like I was about to bludgeon an intruder to death with it. As I'd come to expect, there was no one in the room, but there was a new message on the mirror. This one was bold, the easiest to read of any of the messages I'd received so far. It was 3 words long: I see you. Some awful amalgam of fear, confusion, and anger made my stomach churn. Ultimately, the latter emotion rose above the rest. I hastily dried off and threw on some clothes, then grabbed my phone from where I'd left it on the bathroom counter. I punched in Anders' number and glared at that mirror as I listened to the phone ring again and again. I'd started to think it was too late for him to be awake when he suddenly picked up. He started to ask me how I was faring in my new lodgings before I cut him off. I need you to tell me if there's some way that a person could be getting into the house, I said. Every night I check every window and door. I check every cupboard, closet, and cabinet, and still things are amiss. You need to let me know if there's some entry point that I'm not aware of. Anders didn't seem to entirely understand what I was asking. What's getting in? You let me know if you're having rat troubles. My last tenant before you had rat trouble sometimes. Yeah, sure, I've got rats. Besides the doors and the windows, how could they be getting in? Well, there's the vents of course, and there was a chimney once, though we had it sealed up a good long while ago. And there's also the crawl space of course, though I'm sure you've already poked around down there. Though I knew the home had a crawl space, I'd never had much reason to investigate it. I was never able to find the entrance, even after ripping up all the carpeting in the house. Likely, hardwood had been installed over the access door, making it an unlikely point of entry for an intruder. How do I get down to the crawl space? Yes, you should give the crawl space a gander. I barely stopped myself from smashing the phone into the counter. I plan to. Where can I find the entrance? That'll be on the floor of the bathroom closet. I looked around the room. Surely I'd misheard him. Either that or he was confused again. What? I know, it's an odd place for it, but it's only there because that room didn't always used to be a bathroom. The bathroom doesn't have a closet. Oh, sure it does. Just to the left of the vanity. I looked at the mirror, at that long, oversized mirror. I'd always found it odd for a bathroom of that size to have a built-in floor-to-ceiling mirror. What was it that Anders had said when he'd first visited? That something had looked different about the bathroom. Setting my phone down next to the sink, I stepped up close to the glass. I spent a few moments feeling around the frame, looking for a latch, then I grabbed a portion of the right side of the frame in two hands. After one hard yank, the mirror swung open like a door, revealing a large walk-in closet. Anders was saying something on the other end of the line, but I was too stunned to answer. There was a square-shaped hole at the back of the closet, which I assumed led down to the crawl space beneath the house. The closet floor was littered with all kinds of trash. Filthy sheets, fast food containers, beer cans, and I realized some of my own items. Little things I thought I'd misplaced. A sock, a toothbrush, a comb, and a small frame photograph of me, my sister, and our old family dog. I crouched down to pick up the photo, perched in the doorway as I studied my younger, smiling self. I heard Anders say my name over the phone, except the voice didn't sound much like Anders at all. It was too deep, too clear, too close. When I looked up, a man was peeking out at me from the hole in the floor. He smiled at me, his eyes wide and pupils blown, his smile so wide it looked painful, and his hair long and matted. He was only visible from the neck up, and the harsh lighting made it look like a disembodied head was grinning at me from the back of the closet. Horrified, I rose to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running until I made it to my car, which I promptly drove to my sister's house. The next day, I drove to the police station to file a report. An officer met me at the house to check the scene, and I showed him the hidden closet, which indeed had an entrance to the crawl space. My best guess was that the intruder was entering my crawl space from the small door on the side of my house. He'd likely been squatting in the house during the year in which it sat unoccupied, and when he saw it was being prepared for sale, he had disguised the closet door so as to keep a little room for himself. Why he decided to stay, or why he was leaving me messages, I can't say. From his actions and from what little I saw of him, I think it's safe to assume that he wasn't of sound mind. Unfortunately, the man was never found. For all I know, he's still in that same neighborhood. Hell, he might even be in the same house. I moved across the county afterwards and have lived in studio apartments ever since. The thought of living in a big house with all those rooms and corners and places to hide gives me the creeps. It's not just houses that the incident soured for me, but mirrors as well. These days, when I visit a friend or stay at a hotel, I always have to carefully inspect the bathroom mirrors, shining a light directly into their faces and tapping a finger against the glass. Because the worst detail of the whole ordeal was that, when revisiting the bathroom with the police officer, I stepped into the old closet, closed the door, and looked into the mirror. Instead of the mirror backing, I saw the officer's face on the other side of the glass. For context, I have go as far back as my grandmother Sylvia. I don't remember much about her. Most of what I know comes from old photographs and whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Sylvia grew up in a small, middle-of-nowhere Bible town called Driftwood, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, and the church bells regulate daily life more reliably than any clock. Her parents, my great-grandparents, were Old Testament types who saw sin lurking behind every corner and liked their early morning coffee with the smell of brimstone. They raised Sylvia to fear God with such intensity that she'd spend hours kneeling on the hardwood floor, praying for forgiveness if she so much as took an extra biscuit from the cupboard. There's an old sepia photograph of her I remember Mum kept around for a while. Small and dark-featured with a gaunt little face and lank, unkempt hair. She wore a strange oversized robe that I later learned was the standard uniform given to the members of the New Eden community. If it's not immediately apparent from the creepy name, yes, it's a cult. You might even remember them by the moniker they later adopted after all the infamy died out. They were pretty notorious in the 1980s when that Venezuelan singer Solimar Valencia joined their ranks. You may know them now as the Brides of Christendom, a questionable rebrand, but it worked. You know the ones? They stand outside Targets and Costco's wearing those robes that look like bohemian bridal gowns, passing out pamphlets and targeting families with any young girls in tow. And that's now Now, with all the public scrutiny and police investigations, imagine how bad it was when they were simply known as the New Eden community. A bunch of nut jobs, sure, but harmless and secular and best left alone. This is the world my grandmother grew up in. Now, I'm not sure what happened exactly, though I've done a fair bit of digging since it started, but my grandmother left New Eden when she was roughly 15. She was taken into a halfway house for underaged and disgraced young mothers where she birthed my mother. As far as I'm aware, Sylvia never told my mother who her father was. He must have been a horrible person, because whenever the question was asked, Sylvia would near about lose her mind. She'd get nasty, violent, would force my mother to kneel on sun-baked gravel for the better part of 8 hours whenever she asked the question, and when my mother would hobble back inside, knees bloody and face salty with dried tears, Sylvia would finish off the punishment with 48 hours of enforced starvation. For Sylvia, the more ribs you could see on a person, the more penitent they were. It's no wonder my mother cut ties as soon as she could. She would tell me that Sylvia would wildly pivot between a loving, delicate woman scarred by New Eden to a bitter, abusive tormentor, desperate to pass on some of that same trauma to her own daughter. My mother moved states, got a job, and enrolled in night classes. She worked her butt off and ended up in a junior position at a civil law firm. That's where she met my dad, a paralegal. They fell in love, got married, and soon after, Mom got pregnant with me. The pregnancy nearly killed her. It started with seemingly normal symptoms, a persistent low-grade fever that doctors attributed to a mild chronic infection. She bruised easily, so they pumped her full of vitamins and iron supplements. The tinnitus and heightened sensitivity to smells were written off as typical pregnancy symptoms. But then things started getting weird. My mother developed an overwhelming craving for raw meat. Not just any meat, it had to be fresh, barely touched by refrigeration. My dad would find her in the kitchen at night, standing in the dark, tearing into raw sirloin with her bare hands and teeth. She'd sob afterward, horrified by her own actions, but unable to stop herself. The hunger was all-consuming, primitive. It spooked the hell out of my dad, but he was a first-time father. Pregnancy cravings were a thing, and what the hell did he know? I was strong too strong for a developing fetus. I broke 3 of her ribs as I grew, and the doctors couldn't explain how. But worse than the physical symptoms was the fear. My mother carried around a consuming, endless sense of doom that didn't abate until my birth. She couldn't describe it, couldn't rationalize it, but she was terrified. Not of birth, not of me specifically, but of something else. Something she could sense but not see. It was during her 3rd trimester that she reached out to Sylvia. I think the fear finally overcame her pride, her justified anger at her mother's abuse. No matter their strained relationship, she wanted her mama, and surprisingly, Sylvia came. I found my mother's diary after she passed, and that's how I learned about Sylvia's brief return to our family's life. According to the entries, Sylvia was different, softer, more present. She doted on my mother, cooked for her, helped prepare the nursery. My mother wrote about hope, about the possibility of healing generational wounds through shared experiences of motherhood. Sylvia was respectful, helpful, and anchored during a stressful time, until she tried to drown me in the bathtub when I was 2 weeks old. My dad found her just in time. He didn't see the knife at first. He was too focused on fishing my tiny body out of the water. Sylvia stabbed him, but the blade caught mostly fabric and just a bit of flesh. She was small, malnourished from years of religious fasting and self-imposed punishment, so my father was able to subdue her while still holding on to me. My mother came running when she heard the commotion, and that's when Sylvia started screaming. The things she screamed haunted my mother, enough that she wrote about them constantly in her journals, etched permanently into ink-stained pages as much as her mind. Sylvia had raved about a curse on the women in our family, about how she hadn't been strong enough to kill my mother when she had the chance, and she wouldn't make that mistake with me. Apparently she screamed so hard she coughed up blood. She begged my mother to end our line, said each daughter born was like rolling dice. Not all of us would birth daughters, she said. Some of us would birth something else entirely. They took her away in handcuffs, still screeching about darkness and choosing and something about rooms deep underground where the brides would go. The doctors diagnosed her with religious psychosis, citing her involvement with the New Eden community as the root cause of her break from reality. 3 weeks later, they found her hanging from a bedsheet noose in her room at the psychiatric facility. She left behind a single note for my mother. I tried to save you from being chosen. Now you must save your daughter. End the bloodline before they find her. And my parents did their best to give me a normal childhood after that. They never spoke of Sylvia or what happened, though sometimes I'd catch my mother staring at me with this uncertain look in her eyes. But nothing happened. I grew up, went to college, got a degree in biochemistry, and landed a job in pharmaceutical research. I was the very model of rationality and scientific thinking. Then my parents died in a car accident when I was 27. The police said a deer jumped into the road, causing my father to swerve. Their car hit a tree at 60 miles per hour. The officer who called me said they died instantly, but I later read the coroner's report. The impact didn't kill them, the fire did. Witnesses said the car burst into flames before it hit the tree, though the mechanics found nothing wrong with the fuel line or electrical system. I spiraled after their death. Grief does strange things to people, makes them reckless, desperate for connection. That's how I ended up in a bar 3 months after the funeral, drinking whiskey like it was water, and going home with a stranger whose face I can barely remember. The pregnancy test came back positive 6 weeks later. The symptoms started immediately, and they were eerily familiar from my mother's diary entries. Like her, I developed an insatiable craving for raw meat. I fought it, knew it had to be bad for the baby. My mind searches for answers in science. Perhaps I had an iron deficiency and needed a protein boost. Maybe there was a genetic component. I held out for almost 2 months before I gave in. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I'd find myself standing in my kitchen at 3 a.m., blood dripping down my chin as I devoured raw chicken hearts I'd bought for the dogs. I loved the sound they made, sinew and muscle giving way beneath my teeth. The fever came next, a constant low-grade burn that no doctor could explain. My skin would bruise at the slightest touch. But there were new symptoms too, ones my mother hadn't experienced. I started having dreams, horrible, vivid dreams of dark, underground rooms where something waited in the shadows. It wasn't a memory, I knew that, but it was real. I knew that too somehow. Harriette was born on a moonless night in October. The delivery room lights flickered and died just as she crowned, and when she finally emerged, she didn't cry. She just stared at me with eyes that seemed too knowing for a newborn. The nurses said it was normal, that some babies are just quiet. They ran some tests, signed the birth certificate, swaddled her, and gave her back to me. I went home a day later, alone and relieved. It was short-lived. As she grew, it became clear something wasn't right. Harriette never babbled like other babies. She didn't laugh or cry, just watched, always watching. By age 2, she was diagnosed with solar urticaria, an extreme sensitivity to sunlight that kept her indoors during the day. Her skin would blister and burn within seconds of sun exposure, so we became creatures of the night, venturing out only after sunset. The doctors ran test after test, checking for autism, selective mutism, any explanation for her complete lack of verbal communication. Everything came back normal, but I began to wonder. Small paranoid thoughts began to fester in my mind. I saw the way animals reacted to her, the way neighborhood dogs would whimper and hide when we passed, the way birds would fall silent and still when she looked at them. At night, I'd often find her standing at her bedroom window, small hands pressed against the glass, staring out at our moonlit street as if waiting for something or someone. Sometimes I swore I could hear her whispering, though she'd been nonverbal her entire life. I made a good show of being stern at first, demanding she go to bed. She'd go willingly enough. Oh, she always obedient. But after the 7th or 8th time I caught her standing there, rigid and whispering, I stopped chiding her, stopped searching for her in the night at all. Truth be told, she scared the heck out of me. I'd simply stand in the doorway, watching her silently, rehearsed admonishments curdling in my mouth. One time, as if she'd somehow heard my footsteps, she looked back over her shoulder at me. We simply looked at each other for nearly 15 silent minutes. I swear to God, when I turned to walk away, I think she smirked. She turned 5 on a Monday. The brides of Christendom came on the following Tuesday. 2 women in flowing white robes stood on my doorstep, pamphlets in hand. Their skin was pale, their hair so black it seemed to absorb light. Familiar coloring. I saw similar features whenever I stared in the mirror each morning. I remember staring down at that pamphlet, debating with myself. But I'd been living with a strange little child for 5 harrowing years by that point, and I'd recently finished reading all of my mother's journals. I'd read Sylvia's warning, so I mentioned my grandmother had been part of their community once, and their eyes lit up with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Sylvia's granddaughter, one of them breathed, reaching out to touch my hand. We've been looking for you for so long. I shouldn't have invited them in, but I was desperate for answers about my family history, about Sylvia. They sat primly on my couch, their white robes pooling around them like spilled milk. We talked about mundane things at first, the weather, the neighborhood, their charitable work. They were articulate and warm, speaking passionately about their women's shelters and educational programs. Something about their careful politeness reminded me of funeral directors doctors. Then Harriette wandered into the room. The change was subtle but immediate. One of them stopped mid-sentence, her carefully practiced smile faltering for just a moment. They exchanged a glance that lasted a fraction too long. The younger one leaned forward slightly, hands clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles bled white. "What a beautiful child," the older one said. "Is she yours?" "Yes." "Biological?" "Why does that matter?" They began asking questions then, each one seemingly innocent but somehow wrong. Had she always been so quiet? Did she have many friends her age? Was she eating well? Did she sleep through the night? When was her last checkup? When I tried to steer the conversation back to Sylvia, they barely seemed to hear me. Their attention remained fixed on Harriette, who stood silently in the doorway, watching them with her unnaturally still gaze. "We have a wonderful children's program," the younger one said, reaching into her bag. "Many special little girls like Harriette have found their true purpose with us, their true family." Something about the way she said purpose made my skin crawl. I asked them to leave. That night I heard voices from Harriette's room. Not children's voices, something else. Something that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. When I burst in, she was alone, but her walls, they were covered in drawings. I've worked in pharmaceutical research. I've seen medical textbooks with detailed surgical procedures. Nothing prepared me for what my 4-year-old had drawn. Women split open from throat to pelvis. Their organs replaced with writhing shapes that might have been tentacles or might have been something worse. Faces caught in moments of transformation, skin peeling back to reveal something underneath that didn't follow the rules of anatomy. Not a simple child's doodling, I'm telling you. The drawings grew more detailed every night, more disturbing. She drew them with anything she could find, crayons, markers, her own blood when I took away her art supplies. I'd washed the walls clean before bed only to find them covered again by morning. The images more elaborate, more horrifying. Naked women being penetrated by shadows that seem to move on the paper. I have no idea how she even knows what sex is. She doesn't watch television, shows little interest in books, doesn't speak with and therefore cannot be influenced by neighborhood kids. I'm not even sure if you could call what she drew sex, to be frank. It came across as more violent, ritualistic. The changes in Harriette accelerated after that. Her skin began to slough off in patches, revealing something dark and iridescent underneath. Her eyes gradually darkened until they were completely black, and her fingernails turned the color of tar. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of infection, but deep down I knew better. At the start, I took her to see doctors and specialists, but nothing worked. When they started mentioning prolonged hospitalization and tests, Harriette would act out violently, both towards me and herself. But at this point, despite spending a lifetime grounded in the exploration of the real, for priding myself in being an individual of sound logic, I knew this was something else. Nothing that medicine could explain. Something other. She stopped sleeping. I'd find her standing in different rooms at night, perfectly still, her head tilted at an angle that made my neck hurt just to look at. Sometimes she tracked movement I couldn't see, her black eyes following invisible things across the ceiling. The houseplant started dying, then the grass in our yard, spreading outward from her bedroom window in a perfect circle. I found her in the neighbor's yard one night, crouched over their German Shepherd. The dog's chest was torn open, and Harriette's face was buried in the cavity. When she looked up at me, blood dripping from her chin, she spoke for the first time. The sound she made wasn't English, wasn't anything human. It reminded me of the sound oil makes when it hits a hot pan, all sizzle and hiss. But underneath was something else, something that made me taste metal and smell burning hair. I ran inside and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Forgive me, but I was a mother and I loved her despite it all. I buried the dog before the sun rose, feigned ignorance when the neighbors came knocking. I found the dog's collar days later, hidden beneath Harriette's pillow like some kind of trophy. She should have been locked up in a psychiatric ward that day. But I was weak, and besides, it wouldn't have worked. Desperate, I began researching the New Eden community. I found an online forum for survivors and connected with a user called the Wicked Below 82. She seemed to know things, horrible things, about the community's true purpose, about the 7 compounds spread across North America, Germany, and Australia, about the rooms deep underground where they took the girls who were ready. Her messages became increasingly frantic as we talked. She told me about her time in the compound, about the screams that echoed up from below, about the girls who went down with flat stomachs and came up 9 months later with something moving under their skin. She would have gone herself if she hadn't developed a cancer young that rendered her likely infertile. Thank everything for osteosarcoma, she joked. Then she asked about Harriette's symptoms, and each answer I gave made her more agitated. You need to end it, she wrote finally, before they complete the circle, before before all 7 are born. I can't find her account anymore. I hope nothing has happened to her. But that brings us to tonight. Tonight, I woke to a smell like rotting meat. Following it led me to Harriette's room, where I found a pile of what looked like shed snakeskin, but I recognized the birthmark on one piece. The blood trail led to our bathroom where I found her. Jesus, I can barely write it. I can't describe what my daughter had become. What sat in our bathtub looked almost right, but wrong in ways my mind couldn't properly process. Like when you see a face in a dream and know it's your mother, but wake up remembering features that couldn't possibly fit together into a human face. Parts of her seemed to fade in and out of my vision, as if whatever she was becoming couldn't fully exist in our reality. When she moved, her joints bent in directions that made my eyes hurt. Her skin rippled like oil on water, and underneath was something that made me understand why Sylvia went mad. I did what my grandmother had tried to do, what she knew needed to be done. The thing that had been my daughter thrashed and fought, but in the end I held it under the water. I kept whispering, I'm sorry, even as its claws tore into my arms, even as I watched my baby girl's face shift between human and monster under the thrashing water. The hardest part wasn't the physical struggle, it was when she stopped fighting, when her face became human again and she looked up at me through the water with those big brown eyes, my eyes, and reached for me like she used to when she was small, like she wanted her mama to hold her. But I'd seen what was inside her now. I knew what was coming. I held on until the bubbles stopped, and then I ran. Everything was completely normal until last year. We had what felt like a totally typical marriage. I remember the night things started to get weird because it was right after our 5th wedding anniversary. It was a regular day working at the bank when I got a text from my wife. A text from her in the middle of the day was not unusual, but what the text said was definitely not like my wife. Hey babe, I had an idea for something new we could try when you get home. Now, don't get me wrong, I was thrilled to get this text in the middle of my workday. I think any man would be ecstatic at a text like that, but I was having a hard time getting too excited because something about it felt so off. My wife has never been the kind of woman to send a message like this, let alone want to try something new. She is a very shy and to herself woman. The day moved at a snail's pace as I anticipated what my wife had in store for me. I tried not to overhype it in my head. I prepared myself to find a baked good or something when I walked into the house. I fully believed she didn't mean to send a winky face. Not to say I would have been disappointed with whatever she had in store. I am not much of a wild guy myself, but a little spice never hurt anyone, right? When I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see most of the house lights were off. I suspiciously unlocked the front door to see my beautiful wife standing facing away from me in the doorway to the bedroom. My happiness from seeing her quickly grew into confusion when she didn't turn around to look at me when I walked in and said her name. She would normally run up to me and give me a big hug. In the past, my wife has always been the sweetest person I've ever known. For her to not run up and give me a hug and a kiss was strange. I made my way inside after waiting a second, trying to be as loud as possible in the hope she would suddenly notice I was home and look at me. I got closer and noticed she wasn't moving other than her soft breaths. I was standing right behind her and tapped her on the shoulder. Hey sweetheart, are you okay? Right as I got out my words, she jumped around to face me with a giggle and smile. Ha, that was so funny. Did I scare you? She said while covering her mouth in an attempt to hide her toothy laugh. Yeah, I guess you really did scare me, I replied with a nervous chuckle. So was that your special surprise you talked about? Of course not, silly. That was just the beginning of the fun, she remarked with a smirk and a wink. She grabbed my hand and led me into our bedroom. Under normal circumstances, I would have been over the moon about it, but her scaring me just before leading me into the bedroom felt so off-putting. Did she think this would turn me on somehow? Did one of my buddies reach out to her and tell her to do this? All I knew was that I was not interested in whatever romantic endeavors my wife had planned. I never thought I would say that. As we got to the bed, she pulled back all the covers and told me to lie down. I honestly felt like telling her I had a headache or something, but it was clear she had been thinking about this all day and I really didn't want to discourage my wife from initiating things in the future. My mind was spinning with thoughts of what she might do next, but she did something I didn't expect. She put the covers back over me and tucked me in. I was both relieved and more confused than ever. She gave me a soft smile, then in one fast motion fell to the ground like a sack of wet hammers. I intuitively sat up and leaned over the side of the bed to make sure she was okay, and was only met with the ends of her long brown hair peeking out from the bottom of the bed. "Hey Catelyn, why are you hiding? Can you please come out? I'm not a fan of this game you're playing," I murmured in a tone trying to not sound freaked out. I was only met with the sound of a muffled giggle. I sat in bed for the next 10 minutes trying to tell her to stop. It went from polite asking to begging, but the laughter didn't stop. After my begging didn't seem to work, I got the courage to get out of bed and look beneath me. As soon as I put my foot down, she grabbed my ankle. "What the hell, Catelyn? This isn't funny. You have fun here, I'm sleeping on the couch." I slammed the bedroom door behind me and curled up on the living room couch. I could still hear her laughing from the joke I seemed to miss. It was so hard to sleep that night. The image of her hair barely peeking out from under the mattress really stuck in my head for some reason. It took a while, but I finally fell asleep. The next morning I was up for work a couple hours before her, so we didn't get the chance to talk. I had to go into the bedroom to get my clothes for work, so I peeked under the bed to check on her. She was sleeping peacefully on her stomach, and I tried not to wake her. It was a long, hard day at work. I wasn't really feeling all that scared anymore, more so worried for my wife. I wasn't sure how I could help. Around 10 a.m. I got a text from her. "Hey Emmett, I'm really sorry about last night. I have a lot of explaining to do once we both get home. Can we talk over some pizza?" I felt so much better after reading those words. It might seem insignificant, but my wife hates pizza, so whenever she is willing to eat it with me, I know she is putting in the effort. It was the end of the day and I headed home looking forward to some pizza and some time with my hopefully back to normal wife. I walked through the door and was relieved to see my wife setting the table and putting down a pizza box. She heard the door shut and ran to give me a hug and a kiss. I really felt like I had my wife back. "I'm so glad you're home. Sit down, sit down. I got pizza from your favorite place down the road," she said as she pulled a chair out for me to sit down. We were both quiet for a minute or two after we both sat down. I don't think either one of us knew how to start the conversation. Just as I was about to speak up, she started to talk. "So I know last night was weird. I just got really insecure after hearing a few of my coworkers talk about the things they do with their partners, and I was worried you thought I was too boring. I know I can be shy and don't like to do anything crazy and started to feel guilty for not doing more with you. I wasn't entirely sure how to even go about it or what you would like, so I just went for it. I understand now how I went wrong. I'm sorry, I just don't know how to do this kind of thing," she said as if she had rehearsed it many times in her head. "Why would you ever think I was bored of you? I don't need any of that wild stuff. I married you for a reason. You don't need to try to be something you're not. I love you for who you are," I said as I grabbed her hand. She took a deep breath and looked at me with watery eyes. "I love you too. Thank you for being so understanding. I really want to make it up to you." "That's very kind, but the pizza is enough for me." "No, I'm really serious. I did some more research and found a few good ideas," she said as she put her hand on my thigh. I was so torn at that moment. I was terrified from the night before, but it seemed like she learned from her mistakes. Sure, it was an incredibly strange mistake to think scaring me would get me in the mood, but she is extremely sheltered. That's what I was trying to tell myself. I knew deep down something was still wrong and I should just say no, but I think many people can understand how your body can go on autopilot in moments like this. At this point, nothing was going to stop me, and I'd give every excuse in the book as to why it was okay to let her do her thing. Just like last time I was led to our bed, she made me lay down and immediately put my hands over my head into handcuffs and put a blindfold on me. My heart was racing at this point. I was terrified, but human nature was taking over and it could not be overridden. Right as she put the blindfold on me, she stepped back and I didn't hear her move. I was expecting her to do something to me, but nothing. I laid on the bed feeling more exposed than I ever felt possible. After a couple minutes, I heard the floor squeak and it confirmed that she had been standing right by the bed the whole time. I felt like I could feel her eyes staring at me. It was practically burning a hole in my skin. I heard the light switch flick off. Now I really couldn't see anything. After a few moments of anticipation, I felt her fingertips graze the sheets near my sides, then by my feet, just barely missing any part of my body. I started to maybe get hope again that I shouldn't be scared. Sure, this wasn't what I had in mind, but she was new to this. I was very wrong. That was the last moment I had hope for my wife. This was teasing. This was torture. I was soon met with the sound of her scraping her fingernails against the walls like a wild animal. She moved around the room, scratching anything she could find, along with a brief giggle here and there. It was like she was silently moving from corner to corner. I would hear her make the awful scraping, then it would stop for a second. Then I would be jump scared by her doing the same thing in a different spot. It made my skin crawl like I had a million little bugs crawling on the inside of my skin. I wiggled violently, trying to get out of the restraints or to get the blindfold off, but I was trapped. It kept getting worse as the night went on. She kept getting right by my ear. Sometimes she would just breathe, and other times she would let out a giggle. She would run her hands closer and closer to my body, sending me into a cold sweat. I of course didn't have a way of telling the time, but I would guess it was about an hour in when I stopped begging her to let me go and I just started yelling for help. I guess she didn't like that because she put duct tape over my mouth. Shortly after that, I started to hear the scraping sound on the ceiling. Our bedroom has an extremely high ceiling, so I had a hard time imagining how she was doing it. I couldn't believe the situation I was in. It felt like a terrible nightmare. I kept thinking any minute I would wake up next to my gorgeous wife sleeping soundly beside me, but the nightmare lived on. My wrists felt raw and bloodied. My neck was sore from moving it back and forth trying to get the blindfold off. My whole body ached from trying to free myself, but all that paled in comparison to the psychological torture my wife was putting me through. Not being able to see her next move and not knowing how far she was going to go killed me inside. Before I knew it, I was waking up the next day, still tied up and blindfolded like the night before, but I didn't hear my wife around. I didn't let my guard down, however. I knew she could just be waiting for me to relax, then jump out and scare me again. After wiggling my head around for a bit, I finally got the blindfold off. I was honestly scared to open my eyes. I was terrified that my wife would be standing in the corner waiting for me to look at her. Luckily, when I opened my eyes, she was nowhere to be found, but the relief was brief after seeing the aftermath of my bedroom. Nearly every square inch was scratched, even on the 20-foot ceiling above my head. Some of the scratches even had blood in them. As I looked around at my ruined room, I heard my phone buzzing on the bedside table. Either I put it there before getting into bed or my wife put it there. At this point, it didn't matter, but having my phone near me could be a saving grace. I figured it was my boss calling me since it was 10 a.m. and I wasn't at work. I wasn't sure if my wife had any plans of coming back to get me, but maybe if I didn't show up to work, my boss would get worried about me and come looking for me. I soon had the realization that if they called my emergency contact, it would just be my wife, and I wasn't sure how helpful she'd be at this point. I laid down in my bed the rest of the day, miserable as I watched the hours go by, my stomach growling and my arms were sore from them being above my head for the last 24 hours. It was around 9 p.m. when my phone started getting calls like crazy. I remembered I had plans to get dinner with my brother and he was probably worried about me. I am not the kind of person to just bail. After a couple hours of calling, I heard a few knocks at the door, followed by my brother's voice. It was muffled, but I could tell he was worried. I heard keys start to wiggly in the doorway. He had a set of keys in case I lost my pair and needed to get in the house. He opened the door and yelled out my name as I tried to be as loud as possible, thrashing my body around as I tried to scream out the duct tape that was nearly off my face. Emmett, what the hell, dude? My brother yelled and he ran to my aid. He immediately ripped the duct tape off my face. Oh my gosh, thank goodness you are here, get me out now. Dude, I didn't think you and Catelyn were down bad like that. Nice, my brother said with a smirk. Daniel, this is not the time, get me out, I said with more aggression. Okay, hang on, he murmured as he tried to get the cuffs off. After trying for a while, we found it impossible to get them off without a key. He ended up just getting my bolt cutters and cut them off. It was nearly midnight when I was finally out. My arms were so sore it took me forever just to get them back down at my sides. So, do you want me to pretend I didn't see any of this or something? Daniel said in a casual tone. What? No, it's not what it looks like. Trust me. I wish it was what it looks like. Catelyn is sick or something. She trapped me here all night and practically tortured me. Look, I know we are close and all, but I don't think I need those kinds of details from my own brother, he remarked with a chuckle. You aren't listening to me. Look at the walls and the ceiling. She did this. She is scaring me. I don't know what to do. He looked around the room and then at the ripped apart ceiling, not fully grasping the situation but clearly concerned. Okay, come stay with me tonight if you are freaked out, he said, half annoyed and half worried. I grabbed a few pairs of clothes out of the closet and shoved them in a bag. I wasn't sure how long I was going to be gone, but I wanted to be prepared. My brother only lives a few minutes down the road, so it was an easy drive. The whole time I was worried my wife was going to appear and scare me. We made it inside my brother's house and he apologized for not having a guest bed. He's in his early 20s and lives alone, so he doesn't have much space. But honestly, I didn't want to be far away from him. I didn't dare to tell my little brother I needed him and I was scared, but I think he could tell I wasn't okay. Listen, I don't really get what is going on, but it's getting really late and we both should sleep. Let me know if you need need anything, he said as he awkwardly walked into his room 10 feet away from the couch I was lying on. I had a terrible time falling to sleep that night. Whenever I closed my eyes, I just heard the sounds of her nails scraping the walls in my head. I kept thinking, and I felt her warm breath against my ear. I'd open up my eyes to find the room empty. It was starting to feel like the anticipation of her was becoming just as bad as her actually torturing me. I woke up the next morning exhausted. My whole body felt like I was just in a car accident from being so tense for so long, and I only got 3 hours of sleep. I realized that if life was still normal, my wife would make me hot tea and a warm bath with all her fancy essential oils that probably do nothing, but she always put so much love into it. I started to feel myself slip. I felt sadness creeping in, but none of that mattered. I had to go to work. I couldn't have a no call no show and then call out of work the next day. I would feel terrible about it. Plus, I wanted to apologize to my boss in person. The work day started out strange when I tried to ask forgiveness from my boss, but he acted strange at my apology. He explained that my wife gave him a call and said I wasn't feeling well and I would be absent from work that day. I guess despite everything, my wife still didn't want me to get a slap on the wrist at work. That was only the beginning of the strange day. I found a dead rat in my desk drawer, spiders in my locker, and a huge clump of hair in my lunch. It seemed like I was the only employee being harassed, but they ended up closing and sending everyone home at around 3 p.m. because a few higher ups got nervous and thought they needed to look into it. Banks tend to take stuff like this seriously. I went out to my car to leave for the day and was in shock to find a note on my car. Did that do it for you? Catelyn. I knew it was her, I just didn't want to believe it. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was talk to the woman. I was terrified at this point, but I had to beg her to stop. For some reason, she thought I had some weird kink for being scared. Or maybe she developed one. Regardless, I had to tell her if it didn't stop, I was going to leave her, or even get a restraining order. I didn't want to meet her in person by myself. I didn't know what stunt she would try and pull to convince me to give her one more chance. Since my brother was already partly up to date on the situation, I asked him if he would be there for our meeting. It might be awkward, but I needed him. I didn't want to involve more people than necessary. I texted them both individually and told them to meet me at a coffee shop that night. It was 7 p.m. and my brother was already sitting next to me waiting for my wife to walk in. As she walked in, it was clear she was putting on an act. She looked overly sad and was dressed in bright clothes that she'd never worn in the past, trying to make herself look innocent. She pulled out a chair and sat down at our table. The air was thick and awkward. Catelyn, I wanted to meet in person and have Daniel here because I need you to know whatever you are pulling here isn't what I want. I'm not enjoying whatever act you are putting on. I'm not turned on. I don't find it sexy. Whatever you want to call it. Please stop. If this is something you are into, I think we need to talk to a professional because it's scaring me, I said earnestly as her eyes got watery and Daniel slouched in his chair uncomfortably. I don't know what to say, babe. I have to say I'm confused. I know I'm new to this experimenting thing, but I'm doing my best. This is what you asked of me. I'm just trying to be a good wife. You know me, I'm as vanilla as they come. You are the one who asked me about these acts. I'm just doing my best. She stressed as she fought back tears. Daniel looked at me with confused eyes. Wait, hang on, what's going on? I didn't think you asked for any of this, Emmett, Daniel said. I didn't, I swear. I have no idea what she is talking about. I would never ask anything like that from her. I pleaded to my brother. You are sick, you know that? Why are you doing this to me? She uttered as she pulled out an envelope and tossed it on the table. Daniel and I looked at each other before he reached for it and opened it up. Inside was a letter that Daniel read out loud. Dear Catelyn, I love you with all my heart, but I'm afraid I'm getting bored of the same old. I want something more. I am writing this out as I might feel weird saying it face to face, but I've been thinking about it and, well, nothing gives me a high quite like when I am scared, and I mean truly terrified. The adrenaline rush is like nothing else. I think if we employ this into our lives, it would really spice things up, in the everyday and in the bedroom. I hope you understand and don't get put off by this, but I really want it. Under no circumstance if I say stop should you stop. If I tell you I'm too scared, you know you are doing something right. I can't wait to see what you come up with, Emmett. He lowered the note to look at me, only finding shock on my face. What the hell, dude? Why would you do this to your wife and get me involved? This is so messed up and gross. Don't get me involved in your sick kinks ever again, he said as he threw the the note at me and stormed out of the coffee shop. I begged him not to leave, but he didn't even turn around. I sat and stared at my wife, terrified. What on earth is going on here? You and I both know I didn't write that garbage. I angrily whispered to her. Her face slowly morphed from sad to a satisfied grin. Stop it, I don't like this. Why don't you realize I hate what you are doing? I cried. When will you realize everything isn't always about you? Maybe I'm the one who likes it, she said as she lifted her eyebrows. Stop, you are scaring me, I begged. Good, then it's working, she said as she pushed her chair back and stood up. She turned around and looked like she was going to leave. Just as she was about to open the door, she stopped. She turned back around and looked at me. She slowly walked back toward me and picked up the note my brother threw. She grinned at me smugly as I trembled in fear. She leaned down to my ear and whispered, I guess I did a good job imitating your handwriting, huh? She said as I remained frozen in my seat. I watched as she walked out, got in her car and left, not knowing what to do next. She turned my own brother against me. This wasn't a miscommunication or something. She was doing this on purpose. She was torturing me. But why? It couldn't be just because she was bored of everyday life. Something was wrong. I knew my brother wouldn't want me back at his place. He saw what looked to be proof of me being a nasty scumbag. I wouldn't be able to convince him otherwise. I went to a hotel for the night. I didn't have other options. I didn't want to burden anyone else with this. Plus, I figured she'd just turn them against me too. After what felt like the longest day of my life, I was in my hotel bed trying to relax. I got a text from my boss letting me know they had to close the bank for the next couple of days because they were doing an investigation. I felt some relief from this. At least I didn't have to worry about work for a day or two. I don't remember much of that night, but I do remember the outcome of the early morning. I remember feeling cold and wet. I opened my eyes to see I was in the woods and lying in a very shallow grave. Most of my body was above ground with a small pile of dirt on top of me. I was frozen in fear, the fear of my wife lurking around somewhere. It seemed like she tried to bury me alive but did a half-worked job. I tried looking around at the dark forest to try and get my bearings, but only found more confusion and dread. The cold morning wind whistling around me added to my looming fear, as if it was taunting me, but it didn't scare me nearly as badly as my wife. I looked around for her to try and find her, but only got more and more worried when I didn't see her. I heard the sound of twigs snapping from every side. Eventually I heard a grinding, clicking sound. It sounded robotic but also human. Then it turned into a giggle. I never thought the sound of my wife's giggle would haunt me so feverishly. The sound would come from far to the right, then switch to my left, faster than she would have been able to get that far, much like she did in our bedroom a couple nights back. I started to hear footsteps along with the twigs breaking. I swore it didn't sound like she was walking on 2 feet but on all fours. I tried not to think about it. I told myself my mind was playing tricks on me. I shook my head back and forth in an attempt to shake the visions out of my head. I found the strength in me to get to my feet and to run. I noticed what looked like the right direction to move in, based on the ground being disturbed. Like she dragged me through the dirt to the spot I woke up in. After running for a few minutes, the trail looked familiar. I knew I was close to home. When I would hear the footsteps, I would turn my head to look, only to barely miss her. After what felt like forever, I saw her. She was on all fours circling me, running like a wild animal, her tongue sticking out of her mouth like a dog. I hardly recognized her. Her circles around me got tighter and tighter. As she got closer to me, she slowed down. Eventually, she got right in front of me and stood up on her 2 legs. I tried to run around her, but before I knew it, she pinned me down. I could barely recognize her up until this point, but something clicked when she got close to me. I looked into her eyes, but I didn't see my wife. I saw something else. I guess I should have guessed sooner, but something was wrong with my wife, because this thing wasn't my wife. What did you do with her? I yelled in her face. You will never find her, she whispered with a hoarse voice. As drolls started to come out of her mouth, she abruptly jumped off of me and scurried back into the woods. The last words she said echoed in my head, you will never find her. The relief I felt knowing my wife might still be out there, but how was I supposed to find her? I couldn't keep up the running my whole way home, but managed to sprint. I kept thinking she was gone, then I would hear her nearby, taunting me. I got back to our house. I hadn't been there since this all started happening a couple days ago, so I was scared to see what the inside looked like. I knew I couldn't stay for long. I saw her car still in the driveway, so I planned to take it. My car was still at my hotel, but I needed to make it hard for her to get around. I thought I would also look for clues for my real wife while I was there. After I entered the house, I was shocked to see the state it was in. My wife would rather die than see her home look like this. Glass broken on the ground from wine glasses, dirt and trash in random piles, a foul stench filling my nose. stairs. I couldn't believe what that thing did to our once beautiful home. The horrible smell distracted me, but I remembered my goal once I saw some blood. I followed it to the basement staircase. I grabbed the fire poker by our fireplace and walked to the door leading to the basement. I felt guilty for taking so long and not just heroically running down the steps to hopefully see my wife, but my whole being was so full of dread I couldn't help but feel fear. I knew I had to fight, but every part of my body wanted to flee. The door creaked as I pushed it open. It was hard to tell if it was louder than normal or if the moment made it feel excruciating. I peered through the door to see more blood on the stairs. A lot of blood. I ran down as fast as I could without slipping, noticing blood on the guardrails as I tried to grab them. As I made it to the bottom of the steps, I was in shock. I saw my wife. She laid on the cold, unfinished basement floor. Her breath was visible but faint, covered head to toe in cuts and scrapes. I ran to her and collapsed beside her, weeping like a baby. Catelyn, please get up. Come on, we need to get you out of here. You need help and I don't want her to find us, I said with a panicked breath. What's going on? Was I sleeping down here? Wow, my head hurts, she whispered in a groggy voice. No time for that now, I'm getting you some help, I proclaimed as I lifted her up in my arms with a sudden burst of adrenaline. It was clear from her injuries she needed medical attention, but I wasn't worried for her life. There is no way the amount of blood I saw in the house was all from her. If it was all hers, she'd be on the verge of death. That awful creature must have gotten some blood somewhere else to scare me more, as if the sight of my wife on the floor was grisly enough. We rushed to the hospital in what felt like record time. As I carried her in, the hospital staff approached us asking all kinds of questions. I tried my best to explain, but it didn't sound right coming out of my mouth. I couldn't explain any of it because I was still trying to understand it myself. The staff got my wife set up in a hospital bed. She had an IV for some fluids and some stitches here and there. After a couple hours, she seemed to perk up, but she could tell I wasn't being myself just yet. Babe, I know you are freaked out, but don't be so cold to me. I just went through something awful. Please, I need you now more than ever, my wife said from her bed across the dimly lit room. I was trying to be as loving as possible, but I just couldn't get some images out of my head. I was desperately trying to remember my wife before that monster came into the picture, but it was so hard. Her face went from sad to an over-exaggerated pout in an attempt to make a sad puppy dog face. She tried to make the cutest faces she could. I got closer and closer to her and her happiness grew. I ended up sitting on her bed with her. She leaned close to me and puckered her lips. I gave in and had a blissful kiss with my wife. Until she bit down, I tried to pull away, but she had such a grip I could tell I'd badly hurt my lip if I resisted. Instead, we both sat in silence. Her breathing got slow and deep as my heart rate increased. She slowly loosened her bite but stayed uncomfortably close to my face. Say a word and I will scream, she whispered. Before I could process what was happening, she reached for my hand and grabbed my pinky. Then she violently forced it the wrong way. I screamed in pain as I heard the snap of my finger breaking. My ears were ringing in shock. As I reacted, my wife did as well. Get away from me, you horrible monster. Get off of me. Don't you dare touch me, she yelled at the top of her lungs. I backed away from her. Confused and shocked medical staff ran into our room. What the hell is happening here? A tall man said. Sir, thank goodness you are here. My husband is trying to hurt me. He is the one who gave me these injuries. I didn't want to tell anyone because I was too scared he would hurt me even more. Please help me. Now he is trying to hurt me again, she desperately cried. No, do not believe her. Look at what she did to my lip and my finger. I'm the one who needs help. This woman is torturing me, I said, pleading to the staff as a nurse chimed in. Those look like wounds of a woman defending herself, buddy. Don't play the victim. No, please. Someone has to help me. This isn't my wife. This is a monster. She's manipulating you all. I finished my sentence as two large security guards came to take me out. As I left the room, I turned back to look at that thing sitting in the hospital bed. It grinded at me. It was still playing a game, still scaring me to my very core. I made it outside with the two security guards and they helped me into a cop car. As we drove, I saw my whole life falling apart before my eyes. I realized I was probably going to jail. She would find her way to make me seem guilty of abuse and who knows what else. She would bend the truth. She even had my own brother on her side. Not only did I come to terms with going to jail, but with the fact that my wife was gone. Even if my real wife was still alive, I've been through so much trauma with that monster that I can never see her the same again. At that moment, my whole world was shattered. I felt emotions inside me bubbling up. I felt sadness, pain, anger, all so strong I didn't know what to do. Just as I fought off my tears, I was jolted out of my depression with the cop car swerving off the road suddenly. Every part of my body tensed up as the car flipped and went into a ditch. I was dizzy, but somehow still lucid. I managed to get my seatbelt unbuckled, but soon found myself in an awkward position, just lying in the flipped car waiting for help. The two officers in the front seat were passed out. I was pretty sure one of them was dead by looking at him. After lying in the flipped car weighing my options, I saw someone walking around the car. I yelled for help, but my heart sank when I realized it was her. Suddenly, the car that just moments ago made me feel trapped now felt like my saving grace, the only thing separating me and that monster. I did my best to keep my eye on where she was, but she managed to get around too fast. Before I knew it, she reached through the broken window, grabbed my ankles, and ripped me out of the car. I could feel the glass shards ripping at my skin as she forced me out. She got me out and dragged me a couple feet away from the car. She stood above me, straddling me. Her arms were blooded from pulling me out of the car. She got closer to me slowly, eventually sitting on my chest. As she got close, I could see how bad she looked. Her hair was knotted and ratty, her skin looked dry and weathered. My whole body ached at the sight of her. If this was my wife, something was really wrong. Wasn't that thrilling? She remakes with a crazed look in her eye. Stop it, just stop it. I will leave you and get a restraining order against you. I will do anything in my power to get away from you. I pleaded with her weight on my chest. How do you think you'll get away with that? I have everyone on my side. I have written evidence that makes me seem innocent. No one will ever believe you. You are putty in my hands. Is this what you want, for me to go to jail, to make me look like an abusive, sexually corrupt man? Why are you doing this? I said with desperation. Go to jail? Who said I wanted you to go to jail? Who do you think stopped the cop car? The Tooth Fairy, she said with a chuckle and twisted smile. Then why did you tell all those lies about me? Why are you trying to make me look guilty and then the next minute save me? If you go to jail, the chase is over. You will be protected by the jail walls and steel bars that keep us separated. I won't be able to keep scaring you. Jail would be freedom for you, freedom from me. What if I would rather go to jail than have you constantly lurking around every corner? I said with squinted eyes. She met my gaze and got even closer. She whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. Go to jail and give up finding your beautiful bride? You sick bastard, I said as I tried to sit up to grab her, but she pinned my arms down. You thought because of the little stunt I pulled I was making up a lie about your wife still being out there? Don't be silly. You know your wife. She would never act like this. How do I know you aren't bluffing? I said as my eyes filled with hate. Think of it this way. Would you rather keep looking for her your whole life, then on your deathbed realize it was all a lie, or go to jail and realize on your deathbed that your real wife was alive the whole time, trapped away somewhere, desperately waiting for her knight in shining armor to come to save her, but he never came? What a shame that would be, huh? She uttered with a soft, maniacal tone. Who are you? Why are you doing this? I said as she let go of my wrists and sat up, and began to speak in a normal, cheering tone. What do you mean, goofball? I'm your wife. I'm doing it because I love you. I felt even more scared to see her attitude shift so suddenly. I could see what she was trying to do, showing me how she could manipulate me and others. She got off of me and walked a few feet away. More cops will be here soon. I will keep them off your trail so you have time to get away, but don't get too comfy. Wherever you go, I will find you. Once I find you, keep running. I want you to keep having a sense of getting away from me. I want you to feel safe so I can take that feeling away from you again. I rose to my feet, looking at her in awe. I knew I couldn't be completely confident in my real wife still being alive, but the thought of her in a cold room waiting for me echoed through my head. I had to keep running. I had to keep looking, even if that was exactly what she wanted from me. I started to run. I ran with no clue where I was going. I didn't have a home to go to. Nowhere was safe. I was hopeless. I spent the next several months running away. I hitchhiked and found odd jobs. I even found a super sketchy doctor's office that took some cash I had in my wallet. I had to get some help with the injuries I sustained. A few separate times I thought I was safe. I thought I had outrun the police and, more importantly, my wife. The first time I realized she found me, I opened the door to find bloody teeth all over my doorstep. I was in the next place for about 6 weeks but kept getting ding-dong ditchers. I thought it was just kids, but no kid would be doing it on the hour every hour for days straight. That brings us to the current day. I won't give details on my location in case she is reading this. However, I'm not completely sure if she has found me or not. Sometimes I hear scraping on the outside of the house, or what sounds like something inside my walls. I tell myself it's just animals because it makes me feel better. She might be trying to be less obvious, so I stop running. I was relieved at first that she wasn't doing anything too terrifying, but then I realized it's worse to not know if it's her or not. I've been spending most of my time hoping and praying that my real wife is still out there. I can't help look for her as well as I like, given I'm very far from home. I worry that if I just sit around and wait, they will never find her. Not as long as that thing pretends to be my wife. My biggest fear of all is that she is my real wife. Is she giving me false hope so I have a reason to stay out of jail and a reason to live? No, I can't believe that. I will never give up hope. I love you, Catelyn, and I will keep looking for you. When the edged wind came to our village, it seemed like a typical Alaskan gust, one fitting for late December. Then, as the tall tide of frost lashed against the shore of our home, the sagging branches of the yellow cedar tree stopped bouncing, and I abandoned the idea of the breeze being a breeze at all. Once others understood that, the time for running had passed. The unholy wind reached the village's main road, causing two moving cars to sharply and statically stop. The vehicles were frozen in place, much like the people within those metal graves. Onlookers, enjoying a brisk afternoon in the park, began to scream as loved ones succumbed to that supernatural end, imprisoned in a capsuled moment of time. Those first few victims were the lucky ones. They'd been oblivious to the fate which awaited them. True terror was endured by those who beheld the raw power of the wind. Those unfortunate enough to see the end coming. Regardless, the remaining townsfolk, burdened with the awareness of impending doom, futilely attempted to escape the approaching breeze. Those fleeing residents, far slower than the unnatural frost, were halted in haunting poses as the wind bit into them. Limbs were suspended in mid-air positions. Eyes were left wide and unblinking. Mouths were cursed to forever gape in horror. "Run," Dad screamed, sprinting towards us from a nearby park bench. My brother, my childhood friend, and I were sitting in a sandbox. Already engrossed in a fantasy world, I wondered whether my imagination had conjured the wind. I thought my mind had transcended to a higher plane. It was my way of processing the trauma. However, I accepted the reality of the situation when my father shoehorned the three of us into his Volkswagen Golf. The icy jaws of the wind were nearly nipping at the rear of the vehicle as Dad twisted the key in the ignition, but the beat-up car rapidly lurched forwards. My father wrenched us away from the frost, seconds before it consumed us. "Daddy, where are we going?" I tearfully asked. "I don't know, Jillian," he weakly moaned, maneuvering around fleeing cars and pedestrians. "Are we picking up Mummy?" Alan asked. Dad ignored my brother's question. I was only 8 years old at the time, but I knew that my mother wasn't coming. I understood the significance of the tears in my father's eyes. For 26 years, I successfully managed to suppress that memory. Did such a good job, in fact, that I almost believed it had all been a dream. I started to believe that we had simply moved away from our hometown, and Mum had simply chosen to stay. Dad never convinced me otherwise. He never talked about what happened. Neither did my brother. As for Leon, he moved to an orphanage in Anchorage. We wrote to each other for a couple of years, but his replies became less and less frequent. Eventually, he stopped responding entirely. I used to wonder why my father didn't adopt my childhood friend, but I suppose that would have forced him to accept what happened, and like me, he had no intention of doing that. I thought we would run back to England, having failed to achieve the American dream, but Dad kept us in Alaska. I assumed that he'd been driven by stubbornness, or guilt perhaps. We'd already fled our home. Perhaps fleeing across the pond would have been a step too far. Perhaps it would have felt like truly abandoning our mother. Whatever his reason for staying, Dad didn't tell anyone the truth. He never went to the police. He never returned to look for Mum. "Don't look back, kids," I remember him whispering as we fled the frost. I followed that advice for the next couple of decades, only recalling the event for the briefest moments from time to time. When Dad bought the first computer for our family in 2000, I googled the name of our old town. I typed the word before realizing I was even doing so. I was still young, of course, but I knew that nothing about our speedy departure had been normal. I wanted answers. I'd expected to discover that my village had become a ghost town. That would have made sense. Alaska's unforgiving climate breeds desolate places born to be abandoned. However, the search results revealed nothing, so I told myself I'd imagine the village. I told myself we'd always lived in Anchorage. As the years passed, I became comfortable with the notion that none of it had ever been real, not even my mother, and that was why I did not expect to see a certain person again. Happy birthday, Jill. My jaw dropped when Leon Taylor appeared on my doorstep. It might seem strange that I would recognize a man who was a child when I last saw him, but Leon always had distinctive features. I immediately identified the mole on his neck, just below his facial scruff, and those sorrowful eyes shadowed by his unmistakable overgrown brows. "Leon," I gasped, "what are you doing here?" The man smiled weakly. "Sorry, Jill, I should have done this the millennial way, reconnected through Facebook. No, I just never thought I'd see you again. Do you want to come inside?" I asked, motioning at the hallway. Leon nodded, so I made a couple of coffees whilst my old friend seated himself in the living room. A boy who I'd almost forgotten, almost entirely erased from existence, just like our old town. But I'd always known, just beneath the surface of my shallow memories, that it had all been real. The truth of my childhood was always within reach. As I brought the drinks into the lounge, hands trembling, I tried to dispel the thoughts flooding my mind. Thoughts of that awful day. "How's your dad? How's Alan?" Leon asked, taking the cup of coffee. I sighed. "Dad's been unwell for a few years. He hasn't been taking care of himself and he's getting old. As for Alan, well, Alan's the way he's always been, uptight and distant, but..." "When was the last time you spoke to him?" Leon sharply interjected. The question caught me off guard. "Huh?" "Your brother. When was the last time you spoke to him?" Leon asked. My face drained. He knows, I thought. How on earth does he know? 3 years ago, I answered. My old friend nodded. "Did you fall out?" I scoffed. "That's an understatement. You remember what he was like when we were kids, don't you?" Leon shrugged. "He was 2 years older than us. We must have infuriated him." I nodded. "Sure, but I grew up and he never did. We had a big argument and we haven't spoken since." "Interesting," he responded. I raised an eyebrow. "You're a man of few words these days, Leon." The man cleared his throat. "Your brother messaged me a week ago." My other eyebrow raised. "What?" "It was a very strange message." "Did you reply?" I asked. "I thought you would have preferred to ignore it." He lowered his head in shame. "I'm sorry, Jillian. I replied to some of your letters." "Then you forgot about me," I said. "It's embarrassing that I didn't get the hint." "It wasn't embarrassing," Leon sheepishly muttered. "I read all of them, every last letter." "Oh, well, that's great," I laughed. "Nice to know that you cared." "Jillian, Leon paused, lifting his head. I was scared. "Scared of what?" I asked. "Remembering that day," he replied. "It's why I told your dad I didn't want to come and live with you." "It's..." "What?" I asked. Leon tilted his head. "You didn't know? Did you really think he just dumped me in that place? He might have changed, but your dad was never cold." Still, I refused. "Living with you would have reminded me of what happened to my family." I didn't reply, so my old friend prodded the beast. "Aren't we going to talk about..." "Why did my brother message you?" I interrupted, avoiding the topic. Leon twitched his lips uncertainly, as if unwilling to part them. "He told me that I had to see you." Leon trailed off. "Right," I said. "Why?" "Your brother said something insane, Jillian," he said. "He claimed that Arnold Walker visited him in Fairbanks." My jaw fell. "I beg your pardon, Arnold Walker, my brother's school friend?" Leon nodded. "He escaped. I didn't know others got out," I whispered. My old friend's face was growing paler. "No, Your brother said something that seemed impossible. He said that Arnold did not arrive on his doorstep as a 36-year-old man, but a 10-year-old child." My stomach dropped. The natural response would have been to discredit such an outlandish story, refuting it with a rational explanation. But Leon's revelation served to do only one thing. It confirmed what I'd always known. "A 10-year-old boy made it all the way from our hometown to Fairbanks?" I asked meekly. Leon frowned. "That's it? You're not going to question it?" I did. I messaged Alan repeatedly, but he never replied. "Not a nice feeling, is it?" I asked, sighing. "How did you want me to react, Leon? You were itching to talk about that day." "Well, I'm not skirting around the subject now. Let's talk about it, okay? I know all of that horror really happened. I just never wanted anyone to confirm it." "Me neither," Leon said. "I was trying to avoid your family for the rest of my life. Your brother ruined that." "Yeah, he tends to ruin things," I replied. "So that's it? Alan wanted you to tell me about Arnold Walker?" Leon shivered. "There's more, but look, I know I should have messaged you about all of this first, but I thought about the way Alan avoided my questions. I didn't want you to do the same. I assumed if I were to show up in person, then I wouldn't be able to run away," I finished. "I understand, Leon. I just hate that my brother is still too childish to talk to me." Funny, he called you childish too. Listening to you two bicker is nostalgic." Leon smiled before quickly adopting a solemn expression. "I'm trying to change the subject, but I need to rip off the band-aid. Alan said that Arnold took him to a car on the front lawn. There was a man in the driver's seat, barely clinging to life, with a face mangled beyond recognition. Your brother said the man's skin had been peeled from his face, and he was still somehow alive. I shuddered, vomit climbing my throat. Arnold told your brother that the man was Mr. Johnson, Leon whispered. The farmer? The one who ran the local grocery store? I asked, shivering. My friend nodded. Yeah. Alan said he'd aged a little. Well, his hair was grayer than he remembered. The pair must have been on the road for hours, and your brother didn't know how they knew where to find him. He had so many questions for them, but Mr. Johnson died before the ambulance arrived, and whilst Alan talked to the paramedics, Arnold ran away. He's missing. Crap, I whispered. I'll call my brother. You might struggle, Leon said. Alan ended the message by saying that he was going back home. I gawped. Number, he wouldn't be that stupid. Maybe not. You should try to contact him, Leon said. He hasn't replied to my dozens of messages, but he might reply to you. Not sure he even has a signal out there in the boonies, but you're right, you should try. I spent an hour trying to contact my brother in various ways, but he did not respond. Alan had vanished, and I knew, like it or not, that I had to return to our village too. I should have told Dad, would have told him had he not been one bad day away from a heart attack. In spite of the man he'd become, I loved him. I didn't want to remind him of the place we'd fled. One person should be spared the horror of remembering, I thought. Leon and I, two strangers who'd spent formative years together, piled into my Kia, and we drove from Anchorage to a place that I'd long hoped had never really existed. I was going to be horribly disappointed. On a nondescript road that burrowed into the Alaskan wilderness, my throat started to twist and constrict. The outer edge of my vision shrank and my head pulsated with a slowing rhythm as the world slipped away from me. I struggled to breathe as I came to terms with an awful fact. I recognized that endless road. Jillian, Leon whispered. Don't, I begged. I didn't want to hear it. I wasn't ready. I'd known all along, of course, that our village existed, even when extensive research had revealed nothing about the town. When I thought of the way the breeze consumed the town, erasing its residents, it made sense that it would erase the very place itself. After all, even I'd started to doubt its existence, and I'd lived there. Accepting the unearthly nature of the event wasn't as tough as you might imagine. If anything, I had fought hard to deny it. I wanted to ignore the existence of a paranormal force, though I had witnessed it with my own eyes. Even if there were some Alaskan breeze powerful enough to instantaneously freeze an entire town, we hadn't witnessed that. We'd seen something else. We'd seen that glacial wind freeze the town, not its people, but its tether to time. After an hour of following the frosted landscape, we saw something familiar on the horizon. Leon's face mirrored mine as our wicked village appeared, a bulge of ruin and decay, growing as we neared it. And when we crossed the threshold into the desolate town, the reality of our quest finally dawned on me. Where is everybody? Leon asked. It might seem a moronic question to an outsider. Our old village was clearly an abandoned place. No rational person would expect anybody else to be there. Of course, I understood Leon. He had asked the same terrifying question that was circling the drain of my mind, refusing to flush away. I thought back to that terrible day on which hundreds of people froze in time. Then I thought of Arnold Walker and Mr. Johnson, the two residents who'd supposedly shown up at my brother's door. One of them had looked no older than he'd been in 1998. Time resumed. I finally mumbled, "Yes, but where did everybody go?" my childhood friend asked. I didn't have an answer, neither did my brother, and that was why he'd come here. That's not the real reason, I thought. He was hoping to find her. I rolled onto my old street, noting that the trees swayed in the wind and birds flew overhead, signs that time was flowing. I wondered whether others had fled in the same fashion as Arnold and Mr. Johnson. I even allowed my heart to soar a little as I considered that my mother might have freed herself, might have found Dad in Anchorage, might be wondering where Alan and I had gone. However, I knew that not to be the case. Mum had not arrived at my door, and there had been no national news coverage about people emerging from a town that didn't exist. There had only been an old, half-butchered man and a quiet boy. Both were gone, and I had questions about the nature of their escape from our hometown, given my brother's ominous message to Leon. Something was still dreadfully wrong with our village. 26 years had not changed that. The people of the village had not disappeared into the sunset. Whatever had happened to them, I knew it wasn't good, possibly worse than what happened to Arnold Walker and Mr. Johnson. I pulled onto the driveway of my childhood home, gently trundling over cracked asphalt. Weeds squirmed through the wounds of the suburb as nature sought to erase my childhood from existence. There was no need for that, of course. The wind of 1998 and whatever secrets it held had already done a fine job of wiping my hometown from reality. "Do you think he's come here?" Leon asked as I turned off the engine. Yes, we both know who he wanted to find, I said. My childhood friend nodded, and we both somberly climbed out of the vehicle. The village was colder than I remembered. For a mid-afternoon day in late May, it was unseasonably chilly. Alaska, for the most part, is not the Arctic hellscape that many people imagine. Not in all parts of the state anyhow, and certainly not in late spring. The air also felt stale. It carried the stench of evil, and it seemed to be tinged with frost, as if that demonic breeze were still lingering in the air, nearly 3 decades later. I knocked on the rotten front door, surprised that it did not break with a slight rap of my hand. "Alan," I yelled, "it's Jillian." My brother did not respond, but I wasn't concerned. If he had been there and Mum hadn't, then he wouldn't have wanted to stay. I wanted to use that as an excuse to turn around and leave. I already assumed that my mother wouldn't be there, but another part of me knew that my assumption was more of a wish. In a similar way, I had been secretly glad to find nobody in the town. There was only one person I hoped to find in my old village, and that was Alan. I was terrified by the prospect of finding anything else. "Jill," Leon started softly, "come on, we have to do it." Do we?" I asked. "This was a mistake. We should turn around, we dash." "I agree," Leon sharply interjected, "but we have to find your brother, and when we do, we'll convince him to come back with us. We'll convince him to leave this place behind too." "Why did you come to see me, Leon?" I asked. "You could have ignored my brother's message. You could have pretended none of this had ever happened. That's what you did when you started ignoring my letters, isn't it?" "I deeply regretted that for years, Jill," he said softly. "You were my best friend. You were more than that. We were just kids, but I loved you. I have not made another connection like ours, not even in my adult life." "I know," I replied. "I loved you too, Leon. That's why it hurt when you let our bond peter out. If you'd cut me off from the start, I would have understood, but it just felt like you'd stopped caring." "Never. I just lost the strength to bear that trauma," he explained. "Every letter was a reminder, and that's why I came to your door. That's why I didn't ignore what your brother said. I didn't want something to happen to him. You lost your mother. I didn't want you to lose him too." "We all lost things," I sniffled. "You lost more than me. I just don't understand why you'd come back. Why my brother would come back. I don't even understand why I've come back." "We never really left this place, did we?" Leon asked. "Not in our minds. Even though it doesn't exist in the eyes of the outside world, it never left us. Never let go. Arnold Walker and Mr. Johnson lured Alan back. And he lured us back." "That's an unsettling way of looking at it," I timidly replied. "It's the only way I've been able to look at it," he said. "Whatever claimed this place, it remembered us, and it made sure we remembered it. Not that it would be easy to forget. For years I thought I'd lost my mind, but after talking to you and Alan, I'm not so sure. I find it hard to believe that we'd have experienced a shared delusion. No, it all really happened, and the memory replays in my mind every day. I'll never get rid of it." "Dad seemed to do a good job of erasing this place from his mind," I said. I knew that wasn't true, of course. He had never forgotten. That was made apparent by his deterioration. Alan and I had a close relationship with our father before we left that village. Afterwards he changed. We all changed. Losing Mum had fractured the family, but there was more to it than that. I started to consider that Leon might be right. Perhaps the frost hadn't ensnared the two of us, but it had certainly bitten us. "Do you want me to do it?" Leon eventually asked. I wanted to be courageous enough to open the door, but I wasn't. I nodded meekly and stepped aside, allowing my childhood friend the nightmarish task of facing whatever lay within my old home. He pushed the door handle down, expecting the house to be unlocked, but it wouldn't budge. "Shall we try the back?" I asked. Leon backed up. I quickly realized what he was planning to do, and I opened my mouth to utter a protest. My hulking friend had charged before I spoke a single word, however, and he hurled his body into the door. It quivered in its frame but did not give. "Leon," I cried, "what are you doing?" "Well, I don't suppose you have the key," he panted, massaging his shoulder. I held up my hands. "Look, let's just..." My friend rushed forwards again, and the result was the same. This time, however, Leon released a groan of pain, clutching his arm a little more tightly. "You're going to hurt yourself," I said. "Let's take it in turns to kick the door. That'll work better, and it won't cripple either of us." Leon nodded, and the two of us firmly booted the door near the handle. The wood quaked, and it only took a few attacks for the door to splinter around the lock. The frame splayed inwards, and the metal mechanism fell loose. "Whoops, that worked a little too well," Leon laughed. He led the way into my childhood home, which looked unlike the street outside, the same as I remembered, the same as it had looked on the day I left. There were no shoes left by the door, no muddy prints on the carpet, no indication whatsoever that my brother had visited our old home, which I'd gathered when the front door had been locked. But this was not a relief. I knew in my gut that Alan would have gone there first. He never made it home. Leon shivered. "This place feels cold." "Frozen," I corrected. "Frozen in in time. Is it safe for us to be here, he asked. What if we end up like the others? It's a bit late to ask that now, I replied. The breeze passed long ago. This just seems to be the horror it left behind. Leon accepted my suggestion, then he wandered over to the staircase. My friend took one step before halting in place. For a haunting moment, I believed that he had been frozen in time too. I believed that I'd been wrong and the frost had come for us. But I quickly realized that my friend was still moving, still twitching. He was frozen by fear, not a supernatural gale. There's someone in the bathroom, Leon wheezed. With physical dread in every inch of my body, I joined my friend and looked up. Artificial light spilled beneath the bathroom door onto the dark landing. There might not be anyone in there, I shakily said. Jillian, this is an abandoned town. There is no electricity. Your house is still frozen in time, and it froze with the bathroom light left on. Somebody must have been... Don't say it, I pleaded, upper lip trembling. Do you want me to lead the way? He asked. I didn't. I wanted to run, but I knew I would never forgive myself for doing so. Leon was right, of course. I hadn't allowed him to finish his sentence, but it was clear that he was going to mention somebody in particular. Somebody whose face flooded my mind as we ascended the staircase, one tentative step at a time. Somebody whose name started to tickle my lips as Leon grasped the handle to the door. It wasn't locked. Mum, I moaned as Leon inched it open. My ageless mother was inside. I'm sure I would have screamed at whatever we found, but I was not prepared for the state of the statue before me. Mum was standing at the sink, hands cupped below a stream of tap water suspended in time. As I had always feared, the frost caught her. It was horrifying enough to be frozen in time for 26 years, whilst the rest of the world continued, but that wasn't why I screamed. I'd braced myself for that possibility. I'd spent my entire adult life coming to terms with it. I screamed because I wasn't prepared to see her face. Mum was smiling, not a wholesome smile. It was a taut grin that etched an unnerving crescent shape across her cheeks. There was nothing unnatural about the grin, but it looked painful, and it appeared as if cataracts had taken the entirety of her pupils. Mum, I asked weakly, do you hear me? There was no reply. I peered around the side of her face, and I immediately regretted it. Though she was frozen in time, she did not look unaware. I felt her sightless eyes boring into my face, and I quickly jumped backwards. Let's go and find your brother, Leon fearfully said. As I nodded backing towards the doorway, I locked my gaze onto my mother's profile. My heart pounded as I started to close the bathroom door. I was trying to ignore the idea that had wormed into my mind. The possibility that, behind the glassy cataract, a pupil might still exist, lying dormant, watching me from a face that no longer seemed to belong to my mother. After I shut the door, Leon and I took a few moments to control our breathing. With a slight tremble, my friend finally walked over to the light switch and raised a hand, but I caught his wrist. What are you doing? He frowned. Leave the light on, I whispered. I don't like the idea of leaving her in the dark. My friend's expression softened, and he nodded, seeming to understand my explanation, seeming to empathize, but I was lying. I wasn't worried about leaving my mother in the dark. I was worried about the thing behind that smiling face. Alan didn't come here, I said. Did he really come back? You read the message, Jillian, Leon replied. I know, but... I sighed. I know. He might not have come to the house, my friend suggested. This is the first place he would have visited, I said. If Mum weren't here, he wouldn't have returned. Well, let's look around, Leon urged. You never know. We might find something else. Something to help your mother, perhaps. You saw her face, I whispered. She looked far past help. Don't say that, Jillian, Leon shouted, eyes watering. You idiot, I thought. I was so self-centered, so focused on finding my brother and my mother. I hadn't thought about Leon's parents, his brother Carl, people we left behind when my father saved us. I remembered Leon sobbing as he begged my father to turn around. I'm sorry, I said. We need to find your family too. Leon viciously shook his head. Only if we find an answer, Jill. Only if we find a way to save them. My friend entered my childhood bedroom and I followed him. I imagine that visiting one's childhood home is a strange experience for anyone, but strangeness morphs into horror when that home is trapped in a moment of time. I felt physically unwell when I saw the glass of water on the bedside table, fresh as it had been on the day that my dad took us to the park. Life had continued for me, but the town was still trapped in that dreadful, inexplicable day. Jillian, Leon said calmly, there are people outside. He was standing in front of my bedroom window, and when I joined him, eyeing the road below, I saw them. A man and a woman who seemed to be in their their mid-40s. The man wore ill-fitting clothes, a checkered shirt 2 sizes too small, and a pair of torn jeans. The woman, on the other hand, wore a pristine, shapely dress with a floral pattern. She looked oddly familiar, though her eyes were jittery and unfocused. It was the man who'd locked his eyes onto our house. I vaguely recognize her, Leon said. I nodded. Yeah, I don't know her name, but I remember her. She looks a tad older perhaps. I don't know the man though. You stay here, Leon said, reaching inside his coat. Don't come out. What are you holding? I frowned, noting his shiftiness. Just, Leon concealed his hand within the thick, wintry coat. Are you going to stay in here? My eyes grew as I spotted a glint of metal. You don't? No, Leon, please, don't tell me you have what I think you have. We had no idea what we were going to find here, the man protested. I scoffed. Leon Taylor, carrying a gun, the boy who berated me for killing me a spider. Before he replied, there came the sound of the front door swinging open, and when we spun our heads back to the bedroom window, we saw that the man and woman were no longer on the street. I realized they were inside. Hello, called a man from downstairs. We mean you no harm. I have a weapon, Leon yelled, slipping the pistol out of a hidden holster. Don't shoot. It's Bernie Bradley, the man shouted weakly. My mouth gaped. Bernie Bradley was in my brother's school year. I remembered him, and as I recalled the face of the man I'd seen on the street, I didn't find it hard to believe it had been the face of that same boy, 26 years into the future. What do you want? I yelled. To help you, he replied, before they come. Who? Leon asked. I'll tell you if you put that weapon away, Bernie said. I don't trust you enough for that, my friend growled. Are you Leon Taylor? The man asked. Why? Leon responded. Sydney Manley pushed you off the swing set and you called her a fat cow, Bernie said. She ran home in tears. It wasn't enough. In a place like that, which defied all laws of rationality, it wasn't enough for Bernie Bradley to know that, but Leon and I needed it to be enough because we were hopelessly alone, hopelessly afraid, and hopelessly desperate. My friend reholstered his weapon and we walked onto the landing. Bernie and the woman were midway up the stairs. The man's hands were raised, but the woman barely seemed aware of where they were, barely seemed aware of herself. Leon Taylor and Jillian Maynard, is that right? Bernie asked. How did you recognize us? I asked. You were the only ones who escaped, he replied, the Maynards and Leon Taylor. The only ones? Leon asked incredulously. Bernie nodded. Others tried, but the frost got them. So why aren't you? I started, unable to finish. Mind if we sit down before I answer that? He asked. I looked at Leon, and my friend begrudgingly nodded. We all headed to the living room and sat down. Once we did, Bernie Bradley told us an incredible story, and the woman beside him simply rocked on the sofa, face painted with a disturbing smile. Bernie had been a 10-year-old boy, sitting at his bedroom desk when the chill swept through his room. He told us that he remembered nothing but a black void. He might have been there for an eternity, or it might have been less than a moment. When he woke from that dark slumber, still a 10-year-old boy sitting in the desk chair, Bernie looked out of the bedroom window. He was overcome by the horrible feeling that time had been lost, but he didn't know how much. And when he saw residents frozen in the street, he realized that something awful had happened. Bernie found his own paused parents in the kitchen, and they were completely unresponsive to his pleas. The lonely, frightened boy ran through the town, calling for help. Nobody answered. After a long day of searching, he returned to his house in tears. For a week, Bernie lived on cans of food from the cupboards, and then he heard shouting from the street. Hello, is anybody there? A man called. Bernie ran outside to find Mr. Johnson. The farmer had just woken from a darkness to find the town full of statues. Bernie told Mr. Johnson that he'd been alone for a week, but he had no idea how long he'd been frozen before that. The boy wanted to leave, but the farmer said they had to save as many people as possible. They had a duty to do so. After all, neither the farmer nor the boy knew what might happen to them if they were to run. The frost might return. Anyway, Mr. Johnson took Bernie under his wing. The crops in his field thankfully had unfrozen, as had his entire farmhouse. Mr. Johnson fed Bernie, and the two of them survived. A week later, they found Elizabeth Coulter, the local head teacher, wandering through the town. Over the course of the following year, a dozen more unfrozen souls were saved and brought back to Mr. Johnson's farm. But things changed as time passed. The newer thawed souls were unhinged. The longer a person had been trapped in that black stasis, the less human they became. They were still intelligent unintelligible, but they spoke only of the voice in the void, a voice that they missed in the land of the living. They were irritable, but Mr. Johnson cared for them all the same. Eventually they fled. This only worsened as the years went by. After a decade, Bernie's mother and father unfroze. However, his dad ran and his mum only remained because she was lost and confused. She would rant and rave about the speaker, the one that would make everything better, the one that would make them all eternal. It was during the year of 2018 that things crossed a terrifying line. Mr. Johnson had decided that newcomers were not welcome. It was a decision of necessity, not cruelty. The recently unfrozen folk had become more than unintelligible. They had become dangerous. "Hark, the speaker calls," Walter Frankton screamed. The middle-aged man who had once been a police officer was standing outside Mr. Johnson's farmhouse. When the community of sane people emerged, they screeched at the sight of Walter holding a charred body above his head. Nobody identified the burnt corpse, but Mr. Johnson wasted no time in drawing his rifle and giving Mr. Frankton 10 seconds to flee. Bernie explained that Walter laughed demonically before disappearing into the night. Over the coming years, bodies were found in the street. Followers of the speaker would relentlessly pursue Mr. Johnson's community, so the sane folk kept distant from the people of the speaker. Few of Mr. Johnson's followers understood why they stayed, yet nobody felt able to leave. Something was keeping them there. A couple of weeks before Leon and I arrived, however, Bernie said that Mr. Johnson finally announced his plan to leave. There were murmurs of uncertainty. Everybody wanted to escape, of course, but fear had always stopped them. Still, they trusted Mr. Johnson. If anybody had the power to safely lead them away from the place controlling their minds, it had to be the brave farmer. Packing and preparations began. However, some days later, Bernie Bradley happened to look out of an upstairs window and noticed Mr. Johnson. The old man was wandering aimlessly onto the driveway, stumbling like a drunken man towards his vehicle. Bernie said there was a small child standing beside the car. The young boy led Mr. Johnson to the driver's door with a smile, and the two of them fled. Things disintegrated after that. When a Molotov cocktail found its way through a window, the community dispersed. The sane folk fled in different directions, and Bernie was left alone with his mother. "We've been running for days," Bernie explained. "I keep finding the bodies of people from my community, charred corpses in the street. I tried to leave this town, but it wouldn't let me. The farther I drove, the sharper the pang in my heart. I knew I'd die if I were to keep going." "How did you find us?" Leon asked. "I heard you," Bernie replied. "Hard to miss the sound of an engine in a dead place like this. I had a hunch that it might be you." "You must have heard my brother then?" I asked hopefully. Bernie frowned. "Alan's here? That might explain the raucous a few days ago. I don't know what I heard. Noise. Lots of it. You won't find him, Jill. You have to run whilst it still lets you. The frost might be gone, but something lingers." "The speaker?" Leon asked. Bernie nodded. "I was fortunate enough to never hear it, or never remember hearing it. I don't know what it said to them. My mother won't tell me." Bernie looked at the woman next to him, the one who appeared to be the same age as him, though I realized he was still a decade younger. The horror of our town had aged him beyond his years. "It will be so glorious." Bernie's mother giggled, eyes bearing faint pupils behind mild cataracts. "You're lucky that they didn't see you arrive," Bernie said. "Otherwise, you'd be dead already, but they'll come sooner or later. And you need to listen to me if you want a safe way out of here, okay? We need to distract them, keep them off your backs." I shook my head. "I need to find my brother. I know he came to this town. I thought I'd find him in our home, but..." "Walter wanted him," Bernie's mother hissed. The woman stopped rocking, stopped smiling, and her head snapped to face me with such eerie speed that I thought it might entirely disconnect from her neck. Bernie quivered, seemingly just as horrified by his mother's words as the rest of us. "Mother?" he asked. "Walter wanted him. Walter wanted him. Walter wanted him." The woman laughed, taunting me. "What does she mean?" I sobbed. "Does Walter Frankton have my brother?" Bernie's face whitened. "If he does, your brother's either been flayed or charred." "Christ, Bernie," Leon replied. I sniffled. "I won't leave until I know." "He's already dead," Bernie bluntly said. "We don't know that," I cried. I thought the others were sitting in stunned silence because I'd spoken so assertively. However, as I calmed my breathing and the throbbing sensation in my ears quietened, I heard it too. The sound of laughing voices. Bernie's mother strained to smile broadly. She looked as pained as my mother, but grateful for the privilege of the discomfort. "You don't want to see this. We'll head through the back. Do not look at the street," Bernie hoarsely pleaded as I rose. But I was already running to the door. I flung it open and started to run down the path, with Leon and Bernie in tow. Then my eyes met the mob spilling beyond the end of the street. The crowd easily numbered 100 people, and each face wore a terrible smile, eyes glassy yet all-seeing. There was a man shuffling from the crowd towards me like a terrified toddler taking its first steps. I tried to blot his face from my mind. I didn't want to see it, though it was too late for that. I'd seen everything the moment I faced the crowd. Eventually I fell to my knees and howled as I embraced the truth. The shuffling man who had been flayed alive was my brother. Alan reached towards me with an outstretched hand, weakly shouting something before toppling forwards. He was reduced to a motionless heap on the road. "Jill," Leon cried again, rushing to me. "We have to go." I continued to wail as the gleeful crowd surged forwards. I resisted Leon, but he easily hauled my limp body to the car and bundled me into the back. "He needs help," I blubbered. "He's gone, Jill," Leon whispered. "What about your family?" I asked. "They're all gone," he sniffled, stepping on the accelerator. Staring through the rearview window, I watched the crowd approach my old home. Bernie stood on the front porch, and his mother had her hands on his shoulders. The man did not run. As we pulled off the driveway, it almost seemed as if he, too, finally had a smile on his face. The mob swarmed Bernie, and I heard a brief cry of agony. It may have been ecstatic or fearful. It may have been both. After we crossed the border, no chill pierced us. We were free to leave, but I know Leon and I belonged to that town. I have always suspected that the wind grazed its teeth against my skin when I was a child. It grazed all of us. For even now, I still feel that link, that urge to return to the salivating mob with a smile on my face. When I returned home to find that my father was missing, I knew he felt it too. On November 20th, 2018, Clark County Fire Department personnel responded to a blaze at a remote location in the Mojave Desert. Upon arrival, they noted that the burning building was an abandoned train depot. Once the fire was contained, they noted several irregularities in the ashes. Although the fire had destroyed the building far beyond any hope of repair, hundreds of personal items scattered across the floor were undamaged. These items included purses, glasses, personal identification cards, dog collars, laptops, cell phones, coats, jackets, pagers, backpacks, hygiene supplies, hats, tools, and much more. The items spanned multiple decades in terms of manufacturing date. Some of the items were tools and implements dating back centuries. No items could be linked to the others. Approximately 350 human bones were discovered under the floor, arranged in what law enforcement later described as a ritualistic array. Chief among these irregularities was a large skeleton that exhibited what the coroner described as unnatural proportions. One redacted report suggests that the skeleton possessed structures similar to wings. The most surprising discovery, however, was a middle-aged man weeping among the ruins. He introduced himself as David and apologized for burning the depot down. "It didn't have to be done," he allegedly stated, "but I still had to do it." He was detained and arrested for suspicion of arson and homicide. The homicide charges were later dropped when testing indicated that the human bones were a minimum of 300 years old. The arson charges were successful. Based on the details of his testimony and his clearly unstable mental state, however, the suspect was sentenced to a secure mental health facility where he spent 4 years before undercover personnel discovered him, at which point he was transferred to AHHNASCU. Shortly after incarceration, the inmate submitted to various assessments and field tests. The findings were unusual even by agency standards. In simplest terms, David seemingly possesses the ability to locate the souls of deceased individuals, at which point he is compelled to hear their final statements, which David understandably refers to as confessions, while escorting them to what he calls the other side. These duties were, and remain, psychologically distressing. Immediately prior to burning the depot down, David states that he failed to transport a passenger. The details of this failure remain unknown. David did not discuss them at any point during the interview recorded below. At this time, the agency plans to implement ongoing treatment with the goal of identifying and hopefully rectifying the details of this failure. Administration hopes to evaluate and, if appropriate, commission David as a T-class agent upon completion of his treatment. Prior to his arrest, David's mode of conveyance for these trips was his truck. David presents as a Caucasian male between the ages of 60 to 65. He is approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, with dark hair and brown eyes. David's diagnoses These include depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and severe insomnia. It should be noted that the site of David's depot bore signs of ritualistic use dating back approximately 500 years. The site is currently under quarantine. It should also be noted that inmate 17 has expressed repeated interest in David. Finally, the interviewers would like to note that David has expressed a desire to change his title to something less ominous, such as the ferryman. Interview subject: the pale horseman. Classification string: non-cooperative / destructible / Gaian / constant / low / Phalos. Interviewers: Rachele B. and Christoph W. Interview date: December 19th, 2024. One night I woke up and really needed to talk to my dad. Of course I couldn't because he died about a month before. I paid for the funeral. It was so small and so cheap it was basically an insult to his memory, and it still ate most of my savings. I didn't regret it. I was just ashamed I couldn't afford to give him something better. Still am. Arranging the burial kept my mind busy. When you're busy enough, nothing really has the opportunity to sink in. But the night I woke up needing to talk to my dad was when it sank in that he was really gone. I got out of bed and went for a drive. Drives were something my dad and I used to do. Probably the only actual bonding time we ever had. It was hard for us to talk to each other, or to anyone really. We were both human dams. But something about those drives broke. The dams broke down. We had to actually be driving though. For some reason we said a word till after the wheels were moving. Night drives were the best somehow. We never even looked at each other but talked all the way to the other end of the highway and back. He'd always play music from when he was a kid. Sometimes he'd stop at the gas station for sodas and candy. Once in a while, he'd pull into the all-night diner and buy me breakfast for late dinner. Mostly we didn't stop at all. We just drove. But it didn't matter where we did or didn't stop. All that mattered was I got to go for a drive with my dad. The night I needed to talk to him but couldn't, I went for a drive. Partly because I missed him, partly because I wanted to be able to cry privately. Me crying always freaked both Amber and Devin out, and she didn't need any extra stress. But mostly because when it comes right down to it, solo driving is the most soothing thing I've ever done. Night driving particularly. Night driving in the desert especially. The moon-silvered landscape is this patchwork of contrasts. All shadow and silver, dim light and dark so deep it makes that dimness look bright. There's an inhuman, almost primal peace I find when I'm out there. It's liberating and eerie and beautiful all at once to be alone on the road at night. An exercise in isolation. Isolation can be hard, but it's the only time I feel comfortable being myself. So the isolation has always been a draw. So is the desolation. The desolation of the desert is impersonal and gentle. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. A reminder that you're less than the blink of an eye, that everything you feel and everything you've done won't even be remembered. That sounds bitter, but it's not. At least not to me. In fact, that's the only time I get safe enough to actually feel the things that make me hurt. On that night and on that drive, I was remembering the night before my dad went to the hospital for the last time. He was still himself, but his mind was not exactly slipping, but traveling, flitting back and forth between childhood and adulthood, and staying back more often than not. That night especially, it was kind of like he was a little boy again. He was scared of the dark and started crying, so I got in bed with him the way I used to when my kid had nightmares. He snuggled in just like Devin used to and started talking about his life. Things I never knew, things I never even thought to ask. God, that was hard, knowing there was so much he never told me, so much I'll never know. He got to talking about his mom. I asked him a question, I don't even remember what, and he sat up hopefully, asking if his mama was there. No, Dad, I said gently. Is she coming? The hope in his voice broke me. Remembering his as I drove along the road that night broke me all over again. The desert glided past as I cried, shadows and darkness all covered in a thin film of silver moon. That landscape reminded me of my heart, a bottomless dark pit filmed over with whatever light I could muster for my family's sake. At some point, I noticed the road was different. I know that road, I know every bump and shimmy. You know how desert highways can be, rippled, warped, cracked. I knew the stretch of road I was on was so broken up it sometimes felt like a monster was reaching up from under the asphalt and jerking your wheels around for the fun of it. It had always been that way. I figured it would always be that way. But that night, that stretch of road was so smooth it felt like my wheels weren't even touching the ground, like my truck was gliding on air. That's when I saw the hitchhiker. I don't pick up hitchhikers. Not because I expect anything bad to happen, I really don't. I've found that it's easier to trust everyone until they give me a reason not to, and hitchhikers are no exception. The only reason I didn't pick them up is because I had a family and they needed me. I couldn't take the risk, even a small one, for their sakes. But this guy, I had to pick him up because in silhouette at least, he reminded me of my dad. I'm not big on fate or mysticism, not at all, but I do believe in human connection. I think everything on Earth is more deeply connected than any of us know or even want to acknowledge, and denying that connection is the root of a lot of problems. I guess that actually sounds pretty mystical, but why was I even on the road, right? I woke up missing my dad and went for a drive specifically to cry for him where no one would have to see. On this drive, I just happened to see a guy in need who looks like my dad asking for help. What are the chances? 0. Those chances are 0. It felt like one of those connections, so I pulled over. The hitchhiker climbed in as coyotes howled nearby, pleasantly eerie. The desert outside looked darker and brighter than ever. Up close, the guy looked so much like my dad that it made me choke up. I managed to ask, "Where you headed?" "We'll know when we see it." It was my dad's voice. Chills exploded. For a second, I thought I was going to scream. Instead, I flicked on the cab light, but the hitchhiker flicked it right back off. "David," he said, "I need you to hear everything I never told you." Dad, I remembered the way he'd said mama on his last night at home. That's what my voice reminded me of. "Where's my mama? Is she here? Mama, are you here? Daddy, are you here?" He didn't answer, but of course he didn't. He couldn't because the wheels weren't moving yet. I put the truck in gear and started driving on that road so smooth it felt like my wheels were touching nothing but air. Once we were at speed, my dad started talking. "I loved my mom," he said. "She did so much for me, more than I could ever do for her. I did everything I could. I went hunting out in the hills for food, set traps and checked them every day with my old hound dog. I miss him." He wiped his eyes. "But my mom, my mama. I helped her clean and make dinner, tried to do all my chores without being asked. She was the best, David, just the best. I'd give so much for you to know her. She'd have loved you. I think she would have showed me how to love you better than I did. Reminded me that it's not weak to love well, that not loving well is the weakness. I adored her, David. I wanted to grow up be like her." He sighed. "Instead, I grew up to be like my dad. That's not bad. He wasn't a bad man. He just was how he was, just like me. You'll know how he was because you know how I was. Always telling you how you did this or that or said that wrong. I did that because I saw what he did to me. And it taught me to apply myself. Taught me to learn fast, to do everything on my own, to hold everything together even when I didn't know how to hold myself together. I saw what that did to him. I recognized that it did the same to me, and I know it's the same for you. I'm sorry." He wiped his eyes again. "I wasn't sure I wanted children, but back then you didn't really get a say. It was just what you did, so I did it. But I was worried, David. I was scared, but I couldn't admit that. My dad taught me not to get scared, but even though I couldn't admit it, I was scared right up till the second you were born. And when I saw you, the most beautiful baby boy that ever was, I was still scared, but I was so happy. When I held you, the world got brighter than bright. I promised you and myself that I'd give you the whole bright world, that I'd be as good a dad to you as my mama was to me. I wanted to. David, I wanted to more than I ever wanted anything, but I couldn't figure out how. I wanted to speak so badly. I felt my dam coming down, but it was still holding, and my dad's was broken in a way nothing had ever been broken, so I kept my mouth shut. I couldn't even say I love you when you started getting bigger, not because I didn't. I did, I do, more than I ever showed and more than you'll ever know. I was just so afraid I'd say it wrong. I was afraid I was doing everything wrong. I started believing I was doing everything wrong. I started feeling you'd be better off if I wasn't too involved, the way I'd have probably been better off if my own dad hadn't been too involved. I didn't think it, not like that, I just felt it. To be as good a dad as my mom was a mom took something I didn't have, something I didn't know how to get. You know how I was, David. You know if I couldn't figure out how to do something in 2 minutes flat, then I just didn't learn. That's the worst thing I ever did. I wanted to tell you, I wanted to be that for you. I never was, and now I never will be, but I love you, and I wish I'd known how to make every minute of every day be as good as our night drives. Here's my stop, getting out here." He pointed to this little train depot just off the highway. It was tiny. Lights spilled from the windows, so bright the building looked like it was suspended in a tiny sun. I pulled over. He patted my shoulder and said, "Thank you for hearing." Then he got out and walked across the sand to the depot. When the door swung shut behind him, the lights went out. I sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel for dear life while I sobbed. Then I headed home. About 10 minutes into the drive, my wheels start grinding on the asphalt again. When I got home, Amber was awake and she was a wreck. She wasn't doing well. She never really had, but it got really bad after her sister passed and never got better. It took me hours to calm her down. She kept repeating, "I thought you left me." I told her what I always did. "I'll never leave you." Our son Devin was waiting in the kitchen after she finally fell asleep. "I hate her," he said, "or at least what she's become. And you're not any better, you never were." He took off before I could say a word. I didn't try to stop him, not because I didn't want to, just because I didn't know how. I didn't really get the chance to process what happened that night, but I don't think it would have made a difference. Definitely wouldn't have changed the fact that I didn't know what I thought about it. In the end, I wrote it off as a trick of grief. You know, near-death experiences supposedly only manifest to ease the distress of passing. I figured my experience with my dad manifested to soothe the distress of grief. Until a couple weeks later, when I woke up in the middle of the night needing to talk to dad again. I can't describe the excitement or the hope. Hope that everything I ever believed about connection and interconnectedness was real. That my dad and I finally had the connection we always wanted but couldn't forge. A connection strong enough to bypass or even wormhole through death itself. I got in my truck and went for a drive. About halfway down that buckled, broken highway, the asphalt smoothed out and it felt like my wheels weren't touching the ground. And a couple minutes later, I saw a hitchhiker. My heart kind of swelled and I felt this big smile spread over my face as I imagined another night drive with my dad. But this hitchhiker wasn't my dad, it was a woman. I thought about my grandma, I even thought about Amber's sister. I pulled over, she got inside. I didn't know her, but she seemed to know me. "Mom," she said, "I need you to hear everything I never told you." I frowned but started to drive. "I took care of Roxy, just like you told me to. I really did, but I also really didn't do it right." I felt a sick swoop in my stomach, but didn't say anything. That's one of the rules of night driving, you don't interrupt. I wasn't cruel to her, wasn't mean, didn't neglect her. I would never, not ever. I took care of her, but I didn't love her. I didn't love her because I was jealous of her. How ridiculous is that, being jealous of a dog? She sniffed and wiped her eyes. "I was jealous because of how much you loved her. And Mom, I get it, dogs are dogs, and Roxy was really great even for a dog, but she was still just a dog, and you bought her more clothes than you ever bought me. You put more effort into her treats and prescription food than you ever did for me. You used to feed me stuff that made me sick. I know it was because you couldn't afford anything else, but you still spent more on her. You took her to the vet more than you ever took me to the doctor, and it's not like you knew, but not going to the doctor is how I ended up here at 44 years old. But none of that even matters. What matters is you gave the dog all the love you didn't want to give me, and I get why, I do. Roxy is Roxy, and I'm me." Her face crumpled and she wiped her eyes again. I tried to overcome those feelings because they were so ugly and so stupid. Who gets jealous of a dog, especially such a good one? People like me, I guess. I tried to overcome it. I tried to kill the jealousy, but I couldn't. And you know what? That dog loved me anyway. As much as she loved you, as much as I loved you. Hell, sometimes I think she loved me more. Why do children and dogs have to love as deeply as they do? I always wondered that. It's not fair. It's not fair. She released a shaky breath. You know, Roxy wasn't allowed to sleep on my bed. That was a big no-no and she knew it, but sometimes I'd wake up crying or I'd have a panic attack, and she'd jump up and nuzzle me until I calmed down. Then I'd put her back on the floor. She uttered a sob. Why did I do that? Why? All she wanted was for me to love her back, and she was so easy to love too. I still couldn't do it. She died on a Tuesday morning before work. It was winter. She didn't want to get up. I thought she just didn't want to go outside because of the snow, so I forced her. But she wasn't being a brat. She was in heart failure and the stress of walking in the snow. Oh my god, Mom. She crawled into my lap and died there. If I hadn't made her go outside, she wouldn't have died like that. Not in the lap of someone who never let her on the bed unless they got something out of it. She laughed, then sobbed again. If someone gave me the choice, I would burn in hell for an eternity of eternities if it meant I could go back to give her the life she deserved from me. Sometimes I wonder if you ever felt the same way about me, Mom. I don't know what would be worse. If you didn't or if you did. Here's my stop. Let me out here. Thank you for hearing. Just off the highway, the train depot shimmered into bright, blinding being. The lady got out and trudged across the sand. Maybe it was wishful thinking, but when the door swung open, I saw the silhouette of a little dog in the doorway, tail wagging a million miles a minute. When I got home, it was almost dawn and Devin was having a breakdown in the front yard. Amber was trying to calm him down. When I pulled up, she ran over and started raging at me about everything and nothing. I sent her inside to rest and took over. Devin was coming down on off something and I could tell it was a rough landing. It happened a lot, every couple months at least. It used to make me angry, but I didn't have it in me to be angry anymore. Even if that wasn't strictly true, my anger only ever made things worse. Both Devin and Amber had plenty to be angry about without me adding to it, so I shut the anger down and sat on the grass with him. Devin started talking. I tried to listen, but it was hard. My mind was going as fast as that little dog's tail, 1,000,000 miles an hour, only these weren't happy miles. All I could think is how pointless it all was, how this life was all I had and all my kid would ever have if he was lucky. Not for the first time, I felt like I'd cursed my kid. In a good month, I could afford to give him half of what he needed and none of what he deserved. What kind of life is that? How crappy is it to love someone so much that you'd kill or die to make them happy, but to never have the chance to do either? This is all he gets, I thought. This is all any of us get. What's the point? A few nights later, I again woke up needing to talk to my dad. I got in the truck and drove along that rutted, broken highway until it turned so smooth it felt like my wheels were running along the air. A few minutes later, I saw an impossibly small hitchhiker waiting on the side of the road. I pulled over. This tiny little boy climbed in. He looked so sick and he was so small I had to help him. "Daddy," he said, "I need you to hear everything I never told you." I started driving. I wanted to meet my baby sister. I tried to hold on to see her just like you asked. I tried to be strong, but I wasn't. "I'm sorry I couldn't hold on anymore. I was too tired, Daddy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I kept making you and Mommy cry." His lip trembled. He looked out the window at the wide pale moon and the silver dark desert. "Are you going to forget me, since you have a new baby now?" I started crying too. "Please don't forget me. I won't ever forget you. I won't forget Mommy singing to me and holding my hands when I was in the hospital. I won't forget when you were crying in the garage. I was scared because you never cry, but then you hugged me and said I was brave, and you were only crying because you were happy I was so brave. I won't forget that, Daddy. I'm sorry I made you cry all the time. I'm glad you'll have a new baby to make you smile. Just don't forget me when you smile. And please don't cry when you remember me. Please just smile. I think I need to get out here. Thank you for hearing." The depot shimmered just off the highway, brighter and soft. "Can you walk with me, Daddy? I know you can't go in, but I'm scared of the dark." I got out first, then helped him down onto the ground. He squeezed my hand as we walked across the sand. "Is it going to hurt?" "No," I said, "I promise." When we reached the door, he looked up at me, beaming. He didn't look sick anymore. "Thank you, I won't forget you, don't forget me." The door swung shut behind him and the lights went out. There was such pressure in my chest, heavy and painful, expanding at the speed of light. It felt like it was going to crush me and make me explode at the same time. I opened the depot door. It was dark inside and empty except for spiders. I went back to my truck and drove home. The road stayed smooth for hours. For so long I started getting scared. My wheels didn't touch asphalt again until dawn. It felt like a warning, so I decided no matter what that I would never touch the depot door again. This arrangement, if that's what you want to call it, continued for a while. Maybe once a week I'd wake up needing to talk to my dad. I'd get up and go for my night drive in the desert, trundling down the jagged highway that was so broken it felt like a monster was reaching up to mess with my axles right up to the second the road turned smoother than air. A couple minutes later, I always found a hitchhiker. They were all sad, even the happy ones. That was hard. Being whoever they needed to talk to was harder. None of those people ever knew they were talking to an old fat truck driver named David. They thought they were talking to their dads or moms or grandparents or spouses or lovers or friends or siblings or enemies or kids. Most of them were relieved to see the depot come shimmering into view. A few were anxious. One was terrified. He was disgusting. From the second I saw his silhouette on the side of the highway, everything in me started screaming. For the first time, I thought about driving on past and leaving him in the dust. I almost did, but then I remembered that morning where my wheels just wouldn't touch the ground again. So I stopped and he climbed in. He was too human and too inhuman at the same time. And what he told me, I've never even imagined someone could think those things, let alone say them, let alone do them. But he had. And he wasn't sorry. He was glad. He was gleeful. When he saw my disgust, he laughed. "What did I tell you, Kate? I'm more than human, and I'm less. This is my stop. Thank you for hearing." The depot was there, but the windows dark. When we pulled up, his eyes went dark too. He looked at me. Instead of glee, I saw terror. "I can't go in there," he said. "I won't." Before I could stop him, not that I had any idea how I would, he jumped out and bolted out across the desert. The full moon cast a wild, awful shadow behind him. As I pulled away, I saw the depot door opening. Something slithered out, something huge and just as awful as him, and took off into the desert, chasing him and his hideous shadow. When I got home, there was an ambulance in my driveway. Paramedics were wheeling Devin out on a stretcher. Amber was sobbing. Before I even got out of the car, I was sobbing too. I tried to hug her, but she threw me off. Devin died that night. I didn't sleep for weeks. There was no one I felt like I needed to talk to for weeks. I'm not sure I felt anything. I think I just wanted to die. The first dead, dreamless sleep I had happened 5 weeks after he died. It lasted 2 hours. Then I woke up needing to talk to him. I was already crying by the time I reached my truck. I drove out onto the highway under the moon, through the silver darkness and the howling coyotes. Their songs sounded like what was inside my heart. The broken road knitted itself, turning so smooth it felt like there was no road at all, only air. And then there he was, my boy, standing on the side of the road waiting for me. I pulled over. Rage, grief, and joy rushed through me, none stronger than the other. Devin got into the truck, scared and wide-eyed. I put the truck in gear and we started driving. I need you to hear everything I never told you, he said, and something inside me broke. A dam, but the wrong dam. Before my son could open his mouth again, I broke apart and started raging at him. Years and years of things that had built up behind the dam. Years and years of things I never told him. But not all of the things I never told him. Only part of them, and only the bad part. He didn't say a word. I raged until we reached the depot, all blazing bright and gold. He opened the door before I even pulled over. Too late, I realized what I'd done. I reached for him, but he shoved me away and ran. I got out and chased after him, but I was slow and he was fast, and before I made it halfway, he vanished inside the depot and the lights went out. I stood outside shrieking and begging him to come back out. He didn't. After a long time, I went back to my truck. I was scared I'd never find my way back home after that, but my wheels touched the road almost immediately. When I got home, Amber was gone. I didn't get a passenger for months. I barely slept and woke up 10 times a night when I did, but I never woke up needing to talk to anybody. I never felt any connection. I never felt any hope. It started again about a year later and went along a regular clip right up until I screwed up, just like I screwed up everything else. But until then it was good. I did what I was supposed to. I picked them up. They told me the things they never told anyone else. I listened and delivered them to their destination, ferried them to the last stop before their final destination. The depot was almost always bright. I'm not sure why I care anymore, but I'm glad it was bright. I'm so glad that for most of us, the end is soft and golden light.
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.